pass and get a position.
We must remember that at this time the war was about to start. The country was gearing up really for war, even before we got into war.
I can remember exactly how many blacks there were. Just me. Well, we did have a few people cleaning the buildings, but no secretaries, no other technical people. That was the way of the world in the United States at that time.
For them, I was assigned to teach some of these people, these new people that were coming in, to expose them to electronics.
Digital KC Now brings broadband internet access and the educational support needed to utilize the internet and its resources to neighborhoods, while building a community of knowledge workers. Educating people on how to use the internet is key to improving lives, access to healthcare and education, enhancing business performance, and creating opportunity. For details on joining the Digital KC Now workforce, please visit digitalkcnow.org.
Some of us, we are getting up in age, and what we're doing is not for us, it's for you. We're trying to plant seeds in you that we know will grow into an oak tree that we're not going to get to enjoy the shade. What matters is that you're able to enjoy the shade. What matters is that you do not go through what we went through, right? We stand on a lot of people that have sacrificed for us, so that's why we do this, right? It's about community, it's about the people. And we're also showing that, hey, a corporation's name doesn't define the corporation, it's the people inside the corporation.
Healthy KC Eastside, Truman Medical Center, UMKC, Jackson County. Again, all those people who came out of town just to support what we're doing here in Kansas City. So I want to talk a little bit about the activities that are happening, because there's a lot. We have the African American and Hispanic Inventors Museum, which is just inside. So if you haven't checked that out, be sure to do that. Comes up here. Yes, we can give her a round of applause. Ms. Madeline Romeo serves as the Regional Vice President of External and Legislative Affairs with AT&T.
Kerwin is the president of the network. The network is our African American Employee Resource Group at AT&T. He leads a very large group of people in the step to exploring science, technology, engineering, and math, but understand that it takes a network to be successful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
For me to have lived long enough to see what's happening now.
I got two more questions before you do your speech. George, one of the things we had talked about earlier, you said adapting in spaces where there are people who majority of the time who don't look like us. How do you adapt, but also make sure that you're being your authentic self in those spaces?
Well, what I've discovered is that your personality is locked in by the time you get to middle school. So those of us who are beyond middle school, you just think back, if you've gone to a high school reunion or any type of reunion, those personalities don't change. So you have to be yourself. You are going to be yourself. I think what's most important is that you find a way to contribute to any team that you're on. If you can help your team become successful, then you will be successful. And that's what all of us did when we put our resources together and began the National Society of Black Engineers. You have to rush. Okay, when you're a young person, you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time to accomplish all of your goals. Those are short term. What you want to do is absorb knowledge. You want to master whatever it is that you're studying. Because if you master it, then you can apply it later.
A huge round of applause for him, and I will let you take it over.
Thank you. Johnson. I've been reading stories about him and others to my grandson for 6 years already. And just imagine the feeling that I had personally, and that my grandson might have had if he was there with us. I wish that they were the ones who were doing TV commercials and on the Wheaties box about the Black History curriculum. I did not feel that it was motivating to our brain. Talking about slavery and that type of thing when you're in first grade, that is not motivating. While he was studying about the Underground Railroad, I started talking about a Black inventor who was wealthy man in New York City, and he was an abolitionist, and he was funding the Underground Railroad. So I said, do you know there was a black inventor who was a boss 40 years before the Civil War? And I could just see my grandson's body posture change. He was slumped over when we were going over his homework assignment. When I started telling him about Thomas Jennings, the inventor of the dry cleaning process, his body posture changed. And I knew at that time that I needed to feed him more of that good news. And so I'd say before second grade, I probably read 20 short stories about black inventors to him. And I saw the effect that it had on him, and I felt like I needed to share that with other people. And so I started putting together a presentation, and my concern was I want to put together a presentation that will be accepted in a Black history curriculum in public schools in America. Because that's what we want to celebrate our inventors in the National Inventors Hall of Fame to the same level that we celebrate our athletes who are in the Hall of Fame, our entertainers who get Oscars. That's the same level of respect that is long overdue. Yes. We're going to ask to come here and see Nsbe students from Kansas City. There they are. I just couldn't imagine William Wells. He's an example, healthy egos for young people, but I couldn't have imagined this. Our young people that are here with the National Society of Black Engineers, they are the cream of the crop. And I tell my grandson, I want you to be like them.
Digital KC Now brings broadband internet access and the educational support needed to utilize the internet and its resources to neighborhoods, while building a community of knowledge workers. Broadband equity and connectivity are essential in community infrastructure. Digital KC Now brings internet point-to-point service where it does not exist today.
How long have you been involved at aSTEAM Village?
6 years.
6 years, wow. What keeps you here?
It's a very good program. I actually like it. I find most valuable to be teamwork, because that's really what some part of engineering is, teamwork, and knowing how to work with other people.
aSTEAM Village is hiring, training, and mentoring a workforce from the community to increase knowledge workers right here locally in the 3rd District.
Okay, Google, turn on living room light.
Okay, turning light on.
I got into gaming as a child. I realized I was good at it after I started streaming maybe like a year in, and a lot of people enjoyed my content. It feels really good. It gives me motivation to keep going, and I pretty much pull my inspiration from anywhere. It can be a game, it can be an anime, but also the city itself is just really beautiful, and it makes me want to go out and add Charlotte into my content. So Google Fiber allows me to be able to game and stream at the same time. I can also watch other people's streams while I game. Some people can't do that, like with other services where you can only have one thing on at a time because of your speed. I think more recently, streamers and women gamers that look like me are starting to get a little bit more recognition than they were when I first started a couple years ago. The advice I would give is to don't get discouraged. If you have an idea, don't sit on it, act on it, because you're going to feel better knowing that you got an idea out and you won't regret having your content out there. I'm Morgan, I live in Charlotte, and Google Fiber lets me share my creativity with the world. Yes, it's time to go. We've been on for 4 hours now.
Hello, my name is Braxton McCartney, and I'm the president of aSTEAM Village Junior. Thank you all for participating in aSTEAM Village Nsbe Junior's Black History Month showcase. During the program, there will be links to Black Heritage 5 calendar, the most comprehensive Black history calendar ever. Please keep your microphones muted throughout the program. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Tyrone Taborn, the CEO of STEAM City USA.
Welcome to the metaverse. Thank you so much. That was what a great introduction that was. And our future really does rest in you and so many others. I have 2 minutes, and what I do want to say, we are in the metaverse right now. aSTEAM is located in STEM City, USA. It has a persistent and coherent branding. It's always on. There's always someone you can reach. There's always someone you can touch to. Many of you may be confused a little bit about the discussion around the metaverse. It can take hours to explain, but let me tell you what this old technology, which is new technology now, is really all about. It's not about evening the playing ground. It's truly about resetting the playing ground. This is a reset that many of us will never see in our lifetimes ever again. What the metaverse is the decentralization of information, finance, and other modes of communication in a way that our world has never seen. Everything has been centralized and now it's being decentralized. And as we catch up with the ability to have quicker transactions, the metaverse will become even more part of our everyday lives. So when you have a reset, not a catch-up, not an evening of the playing ground, but when you have a reset, that means you've taken all of the cards, the 52 cards, and you've thrown them up in the air. And we all have to figure out how we move forward. So to all of you on this call, what I want to tell you is that you now have a new opportunity to really play a major role and create a real transformational change in our world. I am so pleased. I am so pleased to work with Mr. Wells and moving us forward. So again, thank you, and thank you for having me. And go back to STEM City USA and really enjoy the 2D metaverse that we've created together. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Taborn. Everybody, thank you for joining. Dr. Taborn, we have a video that we're going to show. We kind of got out of sequence, but we're going to catch up. That's what happens when we go live. So I'm getting ready to share. We thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, we rock and roll together. You know, it's all a big laboratory.
Yes, there you go. There you go. So before we get started, I want to thank everybody for coming to our Black History Showcase. It's going to be an exciting evening. We want you to bear with us as we're using a new platform. but I want to give a special shout out to the city manager, assistant city manager, mayor, Councilwoman Robinson in Kansas City for their support in allowing us to do this, the digital now, which you're going to see us talking about a lot. But before we get rolling in the show, we lost a giant this week, Earl Pace. And I want to recognize him. He was inducted into the CompTIA Hall of Fame alongside Bill Gates and Steve Wozniak. And he's come to Kansas City, supported. My last words with him were about 4 years ago in New Orleans at the convention. I heard a sister give a very powerful speech on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I told Mr. Pace, I said, I get what you're talking about now. When you say go from the career to the boardroom, he said, no, everybody missed it. I meant for everybody to go to their boardroom, because just because you made it to a boardroom doesn't mean that you'll have the voice and the votes to make the change. So to the Pace family, I want to say thank you so much. And please, I know you're going through a tough time, but Mr. Pace is just a set of those shoulders upon which we stand. Also, for all of us locally in Kansas City, I got word that Sonny Gibson is currently going through a 3-hour surgery. He's a local historian. He's always got a kind word. He can give us our history. And so I want everybody to please, please, please hold up Mr. Gibson in your prayers as we will ours. On behalf of our esteemed Village Board of Directors, again, we'd like to welcome you. We'd like to thank you for being here. And the esteemed Village Junior Executive Board, Braxton Mccartney, who you just met, Xavier Hasty, Caden Hall, Jahari Primos, and Elijah Vassar. And then we got a mute that we need to get done here. There we go. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Braxton, who just opened us up, is a graduating senior at Lincoln College Prep. Very sharp young man, been with us for 5 years. And I think we'll go into the video of Dr. Taborn, and we should be back on pace.
What if you could build your own city? A place where every child can find nurturing people to help them achieve their full potential. A place where every adult can access job training support, where health education is abundant, where social justice ruled the land. A place without limitations. Welcome. You have arrived at STEM City, USA. It is what every city should be. A safe and trusted community where you find people and resources to help you become everything you are and beyond. STEM City is unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is a digital twin of the world around you, only better. STEM City is about energy and soul renewal. It is more than a digital world. You can almost feel the power of live cultural events, music, and theater. STEM City promises a better future for children with caring mentors and hands-on activities with dedicated tutors to support our youth. STEM City is your passport to a healthy lifestyle with weekly events addressing our community's many issues. STEM City is your financial well-being with helpful information on wealth management, career advancement, job training, and so much more. STEM City is the community you deserve. It is the city where your dreams can come true. STEM City USA, a place in the sky that is accessible to all who reach for the stars.
Again, we'd like to thank Dr. Tyrone Taborn. You've created a platform. It's growing, it's evolving. And I know you just got out of the BEA conference. So we really appreciate all that you do. And we really appreciate you embracing Esteemed Village and giving us a space inside of STEM City USA for us to share with everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. If I can just say one quick thing, I would just like to shout out to my good friend, Mr. Carl Mack, who's on the call right now, with a wonderful visionary and a wonderful person. And the last thing I want to say, your leadership is unbelievable. But the last thing I do want to say is that right now in the present internet space, the only thing that you can own is .com. In the metaverse, you will be able to accumulate wealth, you will be able to exchange currency, and you will be able to own something. So again, I look forward to having future discussions about our future and our ability to deal with the reset for our people in the future. You keep up the good work, man. You make a world of difference.
Hello, my name is Johari Primos. I am in the 9th grade and a member of the STEAM Village Nsbe Junior Chapter. I would like to thank everyone for attending this event and supporting our chapter. It really means a lot. Nsbe's mission is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. Now, I would like to introduce the Executive Director and founder of aSTEAM Village, Mr. William Wells.
Hey, Will, you've been on mute the whole time, brother.
Yeah, I got you. All right, so we're Digital KC Now is an initiative that the aSTEAM Village Nsbe Junior students are doing to actually create a digital economy in the 3rd district. I sent a shout out to the city of Kansas City, Missouri, our councilwoman for believing in us. And this video, this commercial, this 60-second was actually done by a young lady, and it was the first one she's ever done. So we're going to roll into this real quick for those that have just joined.
Digital KC Now brings broadband internet access and the educational support needed to utilize the internet and its resources to neighborhoods while building a community of knowledge workers. Broadband equity and connectivity are essential in community infrastructure. Digital KC Now brings internet point-to-point service where it does not exist today.
How long have you been involved at aSTEAM Village?
6 years.
6 years, wow. What keeps you here?
It's a very good program. I actually like it. I find most valuable to be teamwork, because that's really what some part of engineering is, teamwork and knowing how to work with other people.
aSTEAM Village is hiring, training, and mentoring a workforce from the community to increase knowledge workers right here locally in the 3rd district.
Okay, so I got to work on my mute. So the first picture that I showed you was Tony Gann, our master of ceremony, who I have the pleasure of introducing. The picture right here is him in the 5th grade, the first year that they came to, we participated in robotics. This picture to the left in the orange shirts is this young man running a robot in their second year of doing robotics. And up here in the top right corner, where you see their Conquest Night 15, is him in the 8th grade when he and his teammates, I'm looking at these young people in the yellow shirts, and all of them are in college or have graduated community college or are in the military. They were the first African-American robotics team in the Kansas City area to win the Champions Award in that event. And they mentored and actually introduced the program to the 4 students that are to the right of it. I've seen him as a high school student go and mentor these students at Benjamin Banneker Charter Academy. I'm looking at 3 of those young ladies down there that are in the program today. And then I've seen him work alongside his peers and his colleagues to actually do community outreach for STEM. So without any further ado, I want to bring to the stage our Master of Ceremony. He's an automotive engineering student at Arizona State University. He's an entrepreneur. He left Kansas City with $30,000 in scholarship money as a freshman to go to Arizona State. And he did so following the Nsbe blueprint. Tony, I think that they're pinging me saying that we need to go to Randy Fears. So I don't know how that happened, but anyway, you'll introduce him. Okay, so everybody, esteemed Village alum, without any further ado, Mr. Anthony Gant.
Hello, I'm glad to be your MC today. We're going to introduce Mr. Randall Fears to the stage now to sing Lift Every Voice. He's a Kansas City native, and he's the minister of music at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Mr. Randy Fears.
Everyone. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the leaves, listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Face shadow beneath our hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
We thank Mr. Randy for that beautiful piece right there. So I forgot to mention, if you guys have any questions during the event, you can just post them in the chat and we'll answer them at the Q&A session at the end. Next, we would like to introduce Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, former mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, and current congressman representing the 5th District of Missouri.
Hello, this is Emanuel Cleaver. I represent Missouri's 5th Congressional District in the Congress of the United States of America. Black History Month is very significant, although I must say that in some ways we play ourselves cheap because there is no history of any of the peoples of the world that can be contained in 28 days, even if it has been set aside with a presidential executive order. But Carter G. Woodson, who founded or began to push for Negro History Week, was successful in getting the attention of Washington. And we saw the beginning of a week set aside in the month of February to look at and study Black history. 1 week would not even contain the history of Martin Luther King Jr.'s first month as the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when he pastored the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. You couldn't even have gotten the first week in recording everything that happened. And so I want to make sure that people understand the significance of this history. Our history really didn't begin in this country. We talk about American Black history, and that's one thing. But our history goes back far and far and far, and all you have to do is go to Ethiopia and go to the presidential palace and find Lucy, who is the world's oldest human being. She is over 4,000 years old. And what does that mean about Black history? Well, I think most archaeologists and most scholars have always believed that civilization began in Africa. And so the first human beings were people of dark skin. The only thing that may cause you some trepidation is that Lucy is only about 3.5 or 4 feet tall. So we have actually grown significantly since God first brought the first Homo sapiens to the world. And so I'm so pleased that aSTEAM Village is also celebrating Black history. And all of you who are involved ought to think about this. If you pay attention and connect yourself with the work of aSTEAM Village, you too can be a part of Black history. You can make something happen. You can change the whole flow of civilization. There are all kinds of things that have yet to be discovered. And what you need to do is learn everything you can, and you're at the right place to learn it. And use that knowledge to feed all of the flames that are inside of you that can give some kind of fire to new things. I'm hoping that there are 25 to 30 young people who are listening to me today, and I'll be long gone when it happens, but you'll be the men and women that the world will look up to as those who changed this world and made life a lot better. Thank you, and stay connected. Please stay connected to aSTEAM Village.
We thank Emanuel Cleaver for that message right there. Now, next we have Nardos Wills, an aSTEAM Village board member, and she will present the aSTEAM Village STEAM Professional Mentor of the Year Award. Welcome, Mrs. Wills.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to present the Professional Mentor of the Year Award. Professional mentors play a key role in supporting what we do at STEAM Village. It takes all different types of resources to meet the objective. Professional mentors help STEAM Village with their influence, talent, time, and finance. This year, our three professional winners are Ms. Teresa Gregory. She's Vice President of HNTB. HNTB is one of the biggest sponsors for our open house in September. She continued her support of the village by contributing financially and rallying professionals to look at the improvement needed for the STEAM Village. Also with HNTB, our second recipient is Ms. Elizabeth Hyatt. She also continued to support, and we're grateful for their unshakable support and continued support. And thirdly, we have Ms. Sandra Tucker. It takes a village to raise a child. We are grateful. We have Ms. Sandra Tucker in our village because she uses her talent every Friday and Saturday to coach and mentor the young students at STEAM Village. She's been doing that for 5 years. That's a lot of time commitment and talent. So we're grateful for Ms. Sandra Tucker. She works for the EPA. Thank you, Ms. Sandra. Now she's gonna make remarks.
Sandra, you have to come off mute and turn your camera on.
Hello, everyone. I'm getting ready to, hi, everyone. I want to thank aSTEAM Village, first giving honor to God, and to aSTEAM Village for honoring me this award. I just wanted to give a little quote saying from Shirley Chisholm, saying, service is the rent we pay for the privilege of living on this earth. And I just wanted to let aSTEAM Village know that it is my privilege and my honor to give back to the youth, because without giving back to the youth, we're not growing as a community. And I want to continue to give that to the community, to the students, because I didn't have that science pioneer in my life as I was growing up as a child. So therefore, I'm giving the knowledge that I have to this kid so they can take that and go with it. So thank you, aSTEAM Village, for selecting me as Professional Mentor of the Year. Thank you.
Congrats to all the awardees, Ms. Gregory, Ms. Hyatt, and Ms. Tucker. I would like to give a big shout out to Ms. Tucker. She takes a lot of her time out and to these kids at aSTEAM Village, and we all know that she is one of the greatest there at aSTEAM Village. So next we have, if you look on your screen, there's a layout button right there, and you can click the layout button. And if you go to stack, it should show the speaker for you. So whoever's speaking will show up on the main screen for you. If you ever need help with that, just drop a question in the chat and we can help you out there. And next we have Ms. Angela Wildflower. She's coming to you from across the Atlantic Ocean, from Juba, South Sudan, in the motherland. Welcome, Kansas City's own Angela Wildflower of Wildflower Dreams Incorporated.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. As they said, I am coming to you from the other side of the world. I'm here in Juba, in South Sudan. So actually very happy to be here. And I'm gonna do a song for you tonight that I was inspired by from the movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman, who was one of our greats. So hopefully you'll be inspired with me as I sing this for you. It's called Stand Up. I've been walking with my face turned to the sun, weight on my shoulder, bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. High across the river, you hear freedom calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna keep moving toward that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I got 'em made of mine. And I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, do you hear freedom calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. And I know what's gonna be might be hard, face 'cause I'm alone. I just might fail. Lord knows I tried. Sure as the stars fill the sky. Take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, do you hear calling? Keep on keeping on. How you calling me to answer. I can feel it in my bones. I'm talking about freedom. I'm singing about freedom. Freedom. Oh, oh. We go, we go. I can feel it in my bones. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. Now, one more that I'm going to do, because like I said, I am in South Sudan, and I am here with 12 world leaders from South Sudan who are here to learn about how to use their art for social justice. So we're here creating songs, we're creating poetry, we're creating scenes, we're creating a movement for the people here in South Juba, in South Sudan, in Juba. So I want to bring one of my friends on here from South Sudan. There's a young artist who goes by the name of Bobby. And me and Bobby tell people what's up. Hey. It's your boy Bobby. I appreciate it. If I do this, I might as well include people. So we can work on now. It's called Imagine. All right. Right. We want you to imagine a different world. A world filled with love, filled with hope. Paradise. Travel to a greater side, a lovely place inside my mind. Don't you wanna be? Imagine you and me in proximity, everything so crazy.
Well, we tried to bring it in from the Angie, we lost it.
Are we muted?
All right.
Hello?
Hey, Angie, the bandwidth is like really gotten bad. We can't hear you. It's broken up.
Well, you believe.
Turn your video off and then do it. That might save some bandwidth.
I'm dreaming of a paradise, somewhere a little Paris-like, where I wanna be. Let's travel to a greater side, a lovely place inside my mind, where I wanna be. Imagine you and me in proximity to everything you ain't afraid to conceive. I believe in possibilities, I'm parting the seas, taking everything I got and all my partners with me, elevating past the hating, a higher decree, a land of milk and honey, yeah, it's promised to me. If you ain't leave, scared to receive, ain't scared to do the work, get a little hurt, bruise your knees. Imagine that, we elevating in a pink Cadillac, candy paint, all my name in the back, and it's a fact that it ain't no beefing, man, we cool as a vegan. Mary J bumping hard on the speaker, conversation like ether. Imagine ain't no hater, no evil. Imagine what we could accomplish as people. I'ma keep it brief though. Top down, deuces up, throw your hands to the sky. Siri, what's the quickest way to paradise? I'm trying to find it tonight. Been dreaming of a paradise, somewhere a little Paris like, where I wanna be. Let's travel to a greater side, lovely places inside my mind, where I wanna be.
I had a plan and the had the friends and the family and the cherish me. But I'm afraid of all this love, imagination. Somebody stole the mob out with heavy blues. We saying the blue. Nobody knows what we have. Not coming out to show the dreams. Just imagine it.
Hey, one time for the people. Let me say, I'm dreaming of a paradise, somewhere a little Paris like where I wanna be. Let's travel to a greater side, a lovely place inside my mind where I wanna be. Peace and love from South Sudan. Hopefully you caught that. This is my guy Bobby. We'll type his Instagram in the chat. Please follow him. We're trying to give as much love to these kids out here, these dreamers. So follow him on Instagram. And thank you for having us. We appreciate you. Good night. It's night over here. So good night, good afternoon, and happy Black History Month. Peace.
Yeah, we're Angie, thank you. We gotta get some broadband over there. Maybe we can get our red tails over there to run some cable and bring some connectivity. We're gonna keep it moving. Tony, I'm gonna go ahead and play the Nsbe video and let you introduce Miss Janine after the video plays.
The year was 1971. Two Purdue University undergraduates, Edward Barnett and Fred Cooper, pitched the innovative concept of establishing a student-led organization to the Dean of Engineering to improve the recruitment and retention of Black engineering students, to reverse the devastating 80% dropout rate of Black students in engineering programs. By 1974, it gained momentum with the active participation of the young African-American men who later became the founders of the Nsbe we know today, and came to be known as the Chicago Six, comprising Edward A. Coleman, Anthony Harris, Brian Harris, Stanley L. Kirtley, John W. Logan Jr., and George A. Smith. 1975. During his term as SBE president, Anthony Harris took the first steps to identify and contact numerous colleges and universities to explain the importance of the SBE and gain support on a national level. It was in this year where he was able to recruit nearly 80 schools. Finally, after perseverance and dedication, from April 10th through the 12th of 1975, the SBE held its first national meeting, attended by 48 students representing 32 schools. During that historic meeting, by majority vote, it became the National Society of Black Engineers. Present day, evolved from humble beginnings. Today, Nsbe takes a holistic approach that cultivates and provides a wide array of programs to our student and technical professional members. This approach supports the preparation and matriculation of underrepresented students moving towards receiving their engineering degrees, and connects members with a conglomerate of company partners to foster and address Black equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace and the local community. While we celebrate how far we have come since 1975, we realize that there is still a long way to go to achieve our dream to help all Black students envision and establish themselves as professional engineers and game changers for the future of global technology. In honor of Nsbe's founders, let's join our hands to help Blacks exceed parity in entering engineering fields, earning degrees, and succeeding professionally.
I am really excited for this next part that's coming up with a message from the Nsbe Chief Executive Officer, Janine Uzel, and then our Master of Ceremony will come up and get us going with our special guest.
Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce the CEO of National.
Hello. Greetings from the Nsbe World Headquarters here in Alexandria, Virginia, which is right outside of our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. My name is Janine Uzel, and I am the CEO of Nsbe. It is an honor to greet all of the participants for the second annual aSTEAM Village Nsbe Junior Black History Month fundraiser. Whew, that's a mouthful. We're virtual, but you know what, everyone? We are here. And aSTEAM Village continues to make an impact on the future of STEM in Kansas City and in the world. And I'm proud to be a part of this community. And I want to thank William Wells and the team for inviting me to make these opening remarks. So I've been in my role as the first CEO of Nsbe for a little over 6 months, but I'm not new to the society at all. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm a former Region 2 chair. I'm lifetime Nsbe member number 482. And I was also a part of the National Executive Board all during my time as a student at North Carolina A&T State University, Aggie Pride. I left my leadership role as the Chief Operating Officer at Wikipedia specifically to work for Black people. And so having the opportunity to lead at Nsbe, it's like a homecoming. It's like a reunion where I'm able to return with the experiences that I've gained throughout my career and traveling around the world. And now I can bring it all back to an organization, a community, a group of people that I really, really want to help. This is legacy for me. It is work that I take personally, and I'm applauding groups and leaders like aSTEAM Village for their efforts that are moving the needle of impact in STEM. Now, in my role as CEO, I am focused on Nsbe becoming the leading influential organization in Black STEM. Our legacy already brings great respect and regard, which I don't take lightly at all. But we also must become the essential thought partner in the work of technology as a change agent for the world. We are leading, solving, building, and delivering on the world's toughest problems. And Nsbe must remain at the forefront to catapult Black engineers to transform STEM and society. Some of you may have heard about our strategic game plan. It's called Game Change 2025. And this plan lights the way to fulfilling Nsbe's aspiration to lead the United States to graduate 10,000 new Black engineers per year by 2025. The plan provides a roadmap that leverages the new normal while continuing to unlock potential, cultivate confidence, and change lives. This is big thinking and a cultural shift for our organization. I like to call it a reboot for the Nsbe ecosystem. And that's why I'm here in my role and here to speak to each of you, because we're stronger together and work like this matters. Now, COVID-19 and its multiple variants have weighed heavily on our student population and our ability to gather. Our membership has been impacted like so many of you and other organizations, which is why I am thrilled. I am so excited to share with you all that we will finally gather again as a STEM community from March 23rd to March 27th in Anaheim, California for our 48th National Convention. Our theme is Inspiring Engineers. This will be a hybrid event, and for those of you that feel comfortable and choose to attend in person, I guarantee that you will experience the safe practices that have been put in place to ensure that we arrive in Anaheim and depart in the best of health. The Conference Planning Committee and the the WHQ team are working diligently to ensure that Nsbe 48 is the best convention ever. So I hope to see you there. Now, finally, let's talk about 2023. I mean, I know it's only February. It's just the beginning of 2022, but we're already thinking about next year and Nsbe 49 because we're going to be right there with you all in Kansas City, and I cannot wait. In March of 2023, we'll not only be hosting the National Convention, but also a number of activities in partnership with Kansas City. To kick things off, I'll be there this May to meet some of the government leaders and to join the aSTEAM Village Nsbe Junior Community STEM Day. So until then, I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay well, and have a wonderful program. I wish you a happy Black History Month. Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
Let's thank Ms. Uzel for her kind words. Next, I would like to welcome multimedia journalist and reporter for Kansas City's NBC affiliate, KSHB Action News, and the moderator of a panel on founding and legacy of National Society of Black Engineers, Ms. Ray Daniel.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate it. I am so excited to be hosting or moderating this panel. Just a quick background. My father is a part of Nsbe. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. He works for Ethicon Endosurgery, Johnson & Johnson. And so any chance he got when I was growing up, he would be talking about Nsbe. So to be here with alumni, to be here with lifetime members, founding members, it is already pretty incredible. So I know we have a short time for this panel discussion, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into it. We have some amazing panelists on here to talk about just the history of Nsbe and also why people got interested in Nsbe. So let's go ahead and introduce, okay, lifetime member number 69, whoop whoop, I saw that in the chat. Let's go ahead and introduce some of our panelists right now. We have Kevin Banks Jr., a field service manager, and I know that each and every one of you have several titles, but I'm just going to name some of the titles that you all have. But Kevin Banks Jr., field service engineer, also the founder of Just the Right Amount LLC. We have Miss Melanie Mosley, CEO of Light Dynamics Inc., also a lifetime member of Nsbe. Keith Boswell, a Nsbe founding member. We have Camila Majid, and I apologize if I messed up your name, Camila. She is also a lifetime member, pharmaceutical plant manager. We have Dr. Tony Arnold McFarland, president of the Research Triangle Professionals for Nsbe, and I know that she does quite a bit of volunteering work to get folks interested into the STEM fields as well. And then, of course, we have George Smith, also known as Uncle George, as I'm told, who's the co-founder of Nsbe. So I just want to go ahead and dive right into this panel discussion. And George, I want to start with you. You know, you sent me the SVE brochure way back when. And although, you know, hairstyles might have changed, the clothes might have changed, the mission was still the same. It's all about that teamwork and also recruiting more people of color into engineering. So tell me a little bit about what went into that brochure, because I was also seeing that the importance of having a co-op. And then Anthony Harris talking about not being afraid of asking for help. So I know that was about 18 questions in one, but if you want to start and we can talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Well, as we organized ourselves, I volunteered to head up the publications committee. And once Dr. Arthur Bond, our advisor, discovered that I had taken on that responsibility, he said to me, George, I need a recruiting brochure. And so it was his leadership, his mentorship, his advice that led to that recruiting brochure. And I will say that that brochure was used for years beyond after we all graduated. You mentioned the hairstyles. It was used until those hairstyles went out of style. But you know, the thing about the publications committee is that we were able to document everything that we were doing. You know, and we have this record of the valuable work, the teamwork that was done in the early 70s. And the purpose of our committee, our Nsbe Founding Archive Committee, is to share documents like that with all of the members of Nsbe now and into the future.
How much did it cost to start Nsbe?
We don't have an exact figure on how much it costs to start Nsbe, but what we do have is we have a list of the corporations that contributed to Arthur Bond's fund. You know, in that brochure, there were several corporations, among them Amoco, Litton, Kodak. You know, there are several organizations that contributed to our effort. And I think it's important for us to understand that we didn't do this solo. We didn't do this independently. We had the student responsibilities, but we had a support system that was unbelievable. One of the members of our team, Keith Boswell, was at the very first Nsbe conference. And he kept all of the documents that he received for both the first, second, and third conference. So when you put together the documents that were generated by the Purdue students, along with the documents that Keith Boswell has brought to the table, we have a wonderful description, a wonderful history of, how did we get here, who did what, and why did we do what we chose to do.
Why did we choose what we chose to do? George, when you first started, and it's so nice to see your face again. I remember when we met a couple of months ago, and just to know that this was an idea that has now transformed into, you have lifetime members on this call. When you hear that, when you see that, when you have these conversations with these students, what goes on in your head as someone who was a part of this from the beginning, and now it has literally just kind of exploded?
Well, I'll just say this. The first time someone asked me that question, I was standing at the podium, and I got choked up, and I did not see that coming. So that tells you, how meaningful this organization is to me, to know where we came from and to know where we are today. In a sense, we knew that dynamic leaders like the ones who are part of this panel would come in the future. Our slogan was that we're dedicated to a better tomorrow, and we have achieved that. We have improved, but we also know that we still have a long way to go. And, organizations like aSTEAM Village are the ones that will help us to fill the pipeline. To me, the most important aspect of what we do, beyond making sure students graduate, is that we reach out to young people during the period of time when they're trying to decide, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to study? We have thousands, tens of thousands of Nsbe role models that these students can look to plan for their future. My colleagues and I, the Chicago Six, we never met an engineer at all. We never met an engineer, black, white, or anything, before we got to Purdue University. And the first engineer we met was Dr. Arthur Bond. And we had no idea how significant that was. He was such a special, dynamic leader, achieved a PhD in electrical engineering, was the 12th in the history of the United States to do so. And he was there on our campus. He was a major influence, not just on the Purdue campus, but also across the United States. And he was pivotal during the period of time that companies and educational institutions were trying to decide what should a minority engineering program look like. Well, they were able to look and see what Dr. Bond had done.
My next question is for Mr. Boswell. Keith, I was seeing some of just as the minutes that you have held on to for years and years and years, and it is just incredible reading some of these, the minutes, this brochure. I see Kevin Banks nodding his head. Yes, it's just been incredible reading this history. And I just want to read the first paragraph real quick in this April 18th, 1975 minutes letter. This is from Anthony Harris. It says, "Dear Keith, what's happening? I hope your trip back was safe and sound. I really feel good about the convention, and I'm sincerely grateful that you were able to attend, because it was your being there that made it a success. Now we owe it to ourselves and to each other to make the National Society of Black Engineers strong, functional, and together, always remembering that together we stand. So Keith, what does that mean to you? I mean, 40 plus years later, hearing that back in 1975 when you all were just getting off the ground.
Well, I think from my standpoint, the theme is what a difference a day makes. So if you really look at the documents from the conference, we met on a Saturday, like a Saturday morning and afternoon, and that was the full time frame for the whole conference, was the morning and the afternoon. So we arrived on Friday night at Purdue. We were put up in the dorms. A number one accommodations, George, thank you. And we met on Saturday. So the fact that we were at a nexus in our development, and the fact that, you know, to me, the key point is that we were active participants in our future. And we chose to go, many from different places, and we chose to participate. So the buzzword for me, and George likes to use cooperation, but we were there with purpose. You know, every university that attended that conference had the same issue. At our school, I went to UC, University of Cincinnati. So at our school, 98% of the Black students that entered did not graduate. That was not acceptable to me. And, you know, there's a variety of reasons, but once we attended the conference at Purdue, it was so encouraging to know that it wasn't just us on the UC campus, it was a national issue, and people were doing something about it. The role of Art Bond, the role of the Purdue chapter, the template that they provided and created for the rest of us can't be overstated. So that's my, you know, feeling at the time.
You said we were there with purpose. Talk
Yes.
a little bit about how critical that is, that aspect, and when you're speaking with these young students who are interested in the STEM field, why being there with purpose is so important.
Well, for me, the issue was that, and I know everyone has very intelligent relatives. You know, you have your uncles and aunts and cousins, very smart people, don't always have the opportunity to excel and use the intelligence that they have. So in my head, there was just so many Black students, particularly, that were, you know, had made the filter of entering the college, but were unable to get a degree. So my goal was I needed to get that paper. I needed to leave the university with something in my hand that when I went to the employers, I could say, here it is. I've fulfilled the requirements. You know, let's move on to the next thing. So it was really about action. It was and solidarity of purpose. You know, the thing that made the Purdue conference so successful was, number one, there was a structure. The structure that Nsbe has today was created at Purdue in 1975. Second of all, no one there was interested in debating whether this school belonged in that region or this, that, or that. We were there for a purpose, and that was to ensure that more Black and minority students were given opportunities for education, and more, as importantly, the structure and support to graduate with a degree in engineering or a technical degree.
Mr. Boswell, thank you so much. I want to open this up to Ms. Camila because I saw you in the chat that said solidarity and structure and how important that is. Talk a little bit about how important that is to have that when you are working to build and bring more people in rather than having those debates or arguments, but trying to bring more people in.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thank you so much for being an amazing host. So I have to say this in the way that us Black folk, you say, all honor and glory, not just to God, but to one of our founders and one of our founding members. Let's give a little clap for that. You know, when Mr. Boswell said solidarity and structure, for those who are seeing us on camera, like if I could have did a shout, I would have did a shout, because for me, I joined Nsbe in the mid-90s. And I'll tell you, those 2 words that he said were strengtheners. You felt that when I stepped into my campus and first heard what Nsbe was, and finally realized that there were thousands of other people that looked like me that were on a campus where we weren't the majority. And I love what Mr. Boswell said. We wanted to do what we had to do to get that degree and go to an employer and say, what about this? I got this, which put you in a unique area. But solidarity and structure, first things first, we as people of color, as Black people, that solidarity on some of these campuses, colleges and universities, where we are one of the only. And I'm about 25 years after Mr. Boswell and Uncle George, and still the numbers are low for Blacks representing the engineering and mathematics and technology fields, right? So to have that not just be said in the words of the leaders that came before me, but to feel that in the spirit of what we did in Nsbe when we go to conferences, shows that what they saw then in the 70s is still relevant, and I would say still critical to what we do with regard to the mission. So.
Powerful. Camila, thank you so much. I want to open this up to you, Melanie. Earlier it was mentioned about how crucial role models were. Camila, you just kind of talked about it as well, about having that representation on campus and how important that was. You know, I was reading a little bit, Melanie, about your background, CEO of Light Dynamics, 20 plus years. How important was it to have role models getting you into what you're doing now? I'm very intrigued.
Critical. And I'll even go so far as to say that some of the things that we're doing here in Chicago with Nsbe and some of the research that we've done, it shows that 85% of the folks that we reached out to, their success in STEM-based fields and particularly engineering only came with role models that encouraged them as students, not only encouraged them during their K through 12 years, but also encouraged them when they were collegiate students. And so when I was a child, one of the first books that my mom had me read was really about Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee Institute. It was at that time, and George Washington Carver, who was one of the first scientists that I read about and what he went through to fulfill his dreams and research and so forth. And so me being that really inquisitive child that took everything apart in the house, looked to folks like him and Granville Woods and on down the line, and then moving here to Chicago, starting to learn about Sarah Good and some of the women in technology and engineering who did incredible things, and Dr. Patricia Bath, who Uncle George and Nsbe was critical in getting her into the Inventors Hall of Fame. These are people who not only inspire you, but really have shown myself and others that it can be done. You know, that the stereotypes about who we are as a people are absolutely incorrect. You know, and so those role models are absolutely critical. And for me, when I was on the National Executive Board, Escorted Moore and Regina Sanders and folks like that who came before me, and Virginia Booth, who was one of the founding members at Purdue University, and Donna O and Marion Blaylock and these incredible women who just stuck it out, and really with the help of Nsbe became incredible engineers and have given back and helped to graduate just thousands and thousands of young people in the engineering.
What kept you to keep going forward, to keep moving forward? I mean, to be an engineer, to be a Black engineer, to be a Black female engineer, what kept you moving forward, I guess, in that aspect?
So I'll tell you, it really began really when I was a child. My parents, I never ever got in trouble for taking things apart and being inquisitive, ever. Never got a spanking. They came home one day and I had taken the brand new television apart. never got in trouble for that type of stuff. And so that encouragement within my family structure was incredible. My father was a recruiter for Phillips Petroleum Company. And the Nsbe chapter here in Chicago at Northwestern University honored him. And he came home and said, Melanie, you have to be an engineer. I said, Dad, I'm not into trains like that. He's like, no, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's a different thing, but you'll understand. And then when I got into college, it was really about getting structure and getting into the Nsbe chapter and understanding what it was all about. So that motivation, that encouragement, that stick-to-itiveness really had to do like hardcore with Nsbe structure and the tribe that we really formed to help get us all through that program.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tony, I want to bring you in as well. You've done a lot of work of bringing students into the STEM field and how powerful and how important that is. What are some of those beginning conversations that you have with those students who may be hesitant, maybe nervous about becoming interested in the STEM field?
Well, one thing that I reflect on is my own story. And I was intimidated by math. I struggled actually with learning math and really until almost middle school. And my mother was a teacher, so was my dad. And they just really, drilled into me, practice your problems and being more creative in how I had to learn. But the turning point for me, I think, was in the 6th grade. I was in a science fair at school, and I did a solar system project, which was my sister's idea, because I always loved the sky and looking up, and I won first place. So when you find the alignment of those things that really interest you beyond the difficulty of the subject, you have more intention and purpose. Another quick story I'll mention is when I was in high school, I got a chance to meet Dr. Ronald McNair, who was also from South Carolina. We had a lot in common. I went to George Washington Carver Junior High. He went to George Washington High School. I played the piano. He played the saxophone. I was telling him, I'm not so sure about engineering and math. My confidence was low. But he told me, don't be afraid to explore the unknown. He said, you can do music and math, which is what I've done. And fast forward almost a year later, our whole high school had just met him when he spoke at our Black History program, but we watched the shuttle explosion. And this was someone we actually met and spent time with. So when I saw that, something clicked in me and said, I'm not afraid of the math. I felt called to do it. I felt that I had a burden to make sure that what we saw would not happen to other people, that, the influences that I had from other relatives. My dad was a part of the first Black NASCAR team. He taught automotive technology. And I know the struggles that they had to go through in the South in the 60s to be in NASCAR. Their drive for wanting to be mechanical geniuses was more than the racism that they face. So just kind of pulling all that together, students have to find that thing that is their cause. Maybe it was a relative who suffered a disease and now you want to go to medical school, or maybe it was the coronavirus and now you want to do biomedical research. I don't know. You have to find that thing that pricks your heart and inspires you beyond your fear.
That's powerful. Let me go ahead and write that down real quick.
And I still have to do that today. There's still some subjects I need to learn and I get a little fear about it, but I think of all the people who are going to miss out if I don't push through.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm just even thinking of Nsbe in and of itself. If we weren't to lean into that fear, would Nsbe be where it was today? So thank you so much for sharing that insight, Dr. Tony. I really do appreciate it. I want to bring in you, Kevin, too, as well, because each one of these panelists is just so incredible that you all are learning as you're interested in your different fields of study, and you're bringing people on with that, which is so incredible and so powerful in and of itself. And Kevin, I know that you're the CEO, you're the founder of the Just the Right Amount, where you're creating scholarship coaching. So I want you, if you could touch a little bit about that and the importance on why you did that, but also what you've learned from Nsbe since you've been in.
Absolutely. I would be remiss if I don't start by saying that Nsbe has been a part of my life since before I was born, actually. My parents met at a Nsbe event in 1991. And you know, to continue on, my parents pretty much groomed me to be an engineer. Everything in my household, from learning times tables in the car with my mom to being a part of advanced math programs in the city of Chicago, which is where I'm from originally, it was all to get me to the point of becoming an engineer. Something my dad has always said was, go get an engineering degree and then you can do whatever you want to do from that point on, but you always have a safety net of being an engineer. And I thought that was so powerful. And so to go on, Dr. Tony had said it, you know, find that thing that really motivates you to want to go through the STEM process. Well, it was losing my grandmother in my senior year. I watched her and my grandfather, who passed away within 2 days of each other, really only have their care managed due to medicine, but never really improve. And I thought, well, why don't I go get a biomedical engineering degree and then go become a doctor? Because I wanted to create natural alternatives to chemical medication. And that was really a driving force for me to go to college and to study engineering. But what kept me in engineering was Nsbe. I remember the very first time I learned that 5 out of the 6 founders of Nsbe went to the very high school that I went to in Chicago, was actually in Kansas City, Nsbe 43, in 2017. And not too long after that is when I met Uncle George. And the amount of reverence I had for meeting him was huge, because it reminded me that greatness was always in my DNA. I just never knew it to the extent that that greatness was. Because Uncle George and I went to the same school, and it's actually in the same physical building. So I could have had his locker. I could have used the same water fountain. I could have sat in the same seat that he had in those classrooms, because that building has not been torn down. It's only been renovated. And so that understanding for me was pivotal, especially during that was my 4th year of undergrad. So I assumed the position of Region 4 chair, which is a national executive board position, in 2018. And I met him a couple months after starting my term. And that led me to say, you know what? Nsbe not only needs to be at the forefront of the work that I do, but helping Black and Brown students be able to finance their education needs to be another critical component. And so that's where Just the Right Amount LLC comes in, because it was born out of my own personal experience going to college and not having $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 plus in student loan debt. Through the tragedies that I suffered in my senior year, I was able to write impactful essays and speak eloquently enough about my story in interviews for $24,000 of independent scholarship money to follow me to my undergraduate institution of choice. And so from there, I was able to get another 24 from my institution. So I only had about $3,000 or $4,000 out of pocket. But what I did not understand was the value of institutional, so renewable versus non-renewable scholarship dollars. And so of that 24 that I brought to the table, 50% of it was gone when I graduated from high school. So I needed to find that other 12, and then plus the additional 4 that I was lacking. And so over the course of my undergraduate career, I did earn roughly $175,000 in scholarship money. But the number I'm most proud of is the $68,000 that I got independent of my school offering me anything. And so what that taught me was that the scholarship process is really a numbers game. Everything you put on an application is going to have a score associated with it. So therefore, you need to be putting the best parts of who you are in every area of that application. So that way you can meet the minimum threshold required to move on from one round to the next and ultimately receive a scholarship check. And so Just the Right Amount is so critical, in my opinion, to what Nsbe is trying to do with helping create more Black and Brown engineers, because if we're able to eliminate money as a barrier for where a student decides to go, then they can really assess on an institution's merits, how well do they cater to me as an African-American student? How well do they cater to my desire to get internships and full-time employment when I graduate? And then also, what is the alumni network like when I graduate? Will I want to come back and be involved in this institution and help more Black and Brown engineers be successful? I think the work that I'm doing and my team and I are doing with Just the Right Amount LLC feeds directly into Nsbe's mission to help increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers.
Wow. Let me go back to college, and Kevin, let me just recruit you. Like, what what was I doing? Okay. My goodness. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I know we're running out of time. George, if we could wrap this up real quickly, this has been such an insightful panel discussion. What is the main message? If people don't remember anything about this event today, about this panel discussion, what do you really want to hit home to people about why this discussion was so important to have?
Well, I want people to know and remember that we are here because of the vision of a student named Edward Barnett, who was a senior when the Chicago Six were freshmen. And he said that he felt that the seniors had a responsibility to the underclassmen, you know, and we accepted that responsibility. And by the time that the Chicago Six became the leaders of the Purdue chapter, at that point for us, it was an obligation, you know. And when I look for people to join this committee, I look for people that I could tell had that sense of responsibility and obligation, and you know, and just love the National Society of Black Engineers. And as you can see, all the people on our committee have represented us very well. This is what our young people can become.
Love that. Would anyone else like to share anything, a main message they want to hit home? Melanie, Mr. Boswell, Dr. Tony?
I want to say one thing. I did put a quote in the chat about why Black History, this is to me, I always think about this, why Black History Month is so important. And it's also important, as Uncle George has mentioned earlier, for students to learn about Black inventors and STEM professionals. Having those stories inspires us. And if we don't have a record of where we've been and who we are, we really don't have a clear picture of where we're going or who we can become. So I just want to make sure those listening, the young people listening, take time to study their Black inventors, current as well, because there's some we don't even know about it are making history right now.
No, that's right. And
My quick 2 cents is that, you know, when we met at Purdue almost 50 years ago, I absolutely know that I had no idea where Nsbe would end up. All I really did know was that we had an issue that needed to be resolved. And we acted on that. Again, didn't know how it was going to come out, but you know, active participation, meaningful dialogue, and purpose really provide a platform for progress. So to me, it's about participating and understanding, you know, kind of what the goals are. And the Purdue folks, Ed Barnett specifically, really laid out, you know, the yellow brick road for us to follow.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that I would really like to convey for those parents and those young people that are out there that are on and watching this panel, when you get through your high school, and matriculate through your high school experience and get into college, seek out your Nsbe chapter. You'll need a support system while you're there. As smart as you are, there's always going to be that one professor or that one piece of code or that one differential equation. It's going to give you some problems and give you a headache. Your Nsbe brothers and sisters are going to be there to help you and support you. And then in addition to that, make sure, parents, that you are encouraging your young people through this process. It's not easy to get an engineering degree, but with your help and with your support, they absolutely can do it. In addition to that, just a little plug for some of the things that we're doing here. Here in Chicago, we're building our first Nsbe-based STEM center called The Experience. And so look for an announcement about that very, very soon. Something that has been championed by Uncle George and all of our founders here in Chicago, and definitely supported. Something that will allow us to demystify STEM within our community so that we can continue to build more Black and Brown engineers. So, and thank you, Ray. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Seriously, thank you, each and every one of you. Just incredible. So, man, y'all make me want to be a part of Nsbe for sure. So thank you. That is all the time that we have. So with that, I will leave it to the next person. But again, thank you so much to our panelists. So virtual clap for all of you all.
Thank you to all of our panelists, George, Camila, Keith, Dr. Tony, Melanie, and Kevin. And I thank you, Ms. Ray Daniels, for moderating this discussion. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Michael Smith, known as Dr. Mike, member of aSTEAM Village Board of Directors and an advisor to the aSTEAM Village Nsbe Junior Chapter.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So glad to see you. Thank you so much to Ray and the panel. It was an amazing panel. On behalf of the aSTEAM Village Board of Directors and our chairperson, Chester Thompson, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce my former boss and the Nsbe executive and former Nsbe executive director and creator of the most comprehensive Black Heritage calendar ever, the distinguished Dr. Carl B. Mack.
Thanks, Doc. Doc, I certainly appreciate the brevity of that introduction. Thank you all so much. And so, get this up and we're going to get going here as quickly as we can. Can everybody see the screen? Mike, can you let me know if folks can just, Mike, give me a hand wave if they can see it. Okay, good. So listen, folks, I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on anything else. I want to try to get through this as quickly as I can. First thing I want to do is I want to just give you a little bit of history on Black Heritage Day and how it came about. I was a young engineer. I graduated from Mississippi State Mechanical Engineering. I was at work one day and there was a white guy that I worked with by the name of Henry Cody. And Cody had read an article in the New York Times about Henry O. Flipper. And Henry O. Flipper and was born into slavery and in 1877 became the first Black to graduate from the first engineering school in this country, and that's West Point. And as Cody was telling me about this, I thought the story was absolutely fascinating, but I was embarrassed that this white man knew more about my culture and my history than I did. And Guy gave me the idea to do a Black History calendar that I could sit down and every day take a couple of minutes and just learn something beautiful and positive about myself. And so what you see here is the first Black History calendar that I did, and it was published in 1992. Then I came back and I did, this one isn't, okay, there you go. This is the second version of Black Heritage Day. And so the difference is on the first calendar, you had Monday, 1992. On this calendar and those going forward, they're perpetual. And this is Black Heritage Day 3. And then this is the recent calendar, Black Heritage Day 4. And inside the calendar, you have a table of contents, 4 pages. So anybody that you're interested in, you can quickly find those people. So these are the table of contents of that. And when I put this calendar together, everybody in the calendar is featured on a day significant in their life, with the exception of one day. And I purposely did that, and that's December 5th, because it was a case for reparations that I wanted to make. And I needed that case made so that we can understand going forward. When you look at December 6th, and December 6th being the day that the 13th Amendment was ratified and talked about our end of chattel slavery. And with that being said, Google was looking for something. They had been scouring the planet, if you will. And if you know Google, I mean, they got their hands on everything. But they were looking for some information that they can, for every day of the year, feature in Black history. And I just happened to have finished up the calendar at that time. And one of my former students, Justin Steele, works at Google and the Google Foundation. I sent him a copy of the calendar. He shared it with them. And they contacted me and wanted to know if they could license my information. So currently, this is what the relationship between Black Heritage Day and Google is. Hey, Google, what happened on this day in Black history?
On February 20th, 1966, Emmett Ashford became the first Black umpire in the history of Major League Baseball. Ashford was in the American League. Art Williams was the first Black umpire in the National League. His major league career ended in 1970 with what he described as the culmination of my dreams. Ashford became the first Black man to umpire Major League Baseball's World Series. Adapted from Black Heritage Day 4 calendar by author, lecturer, and civil rights activist Dr. Karl Mack.
So literally, fam, every day of the year, I wake up and I ask that question to Google about what happened on this day in Black history. It's pretty fascinating. Now, with that being said, I'm now working on a new calendar. And the thing about Black Heritage Day 4 that I was a little disappointed in is that I didn't have an equal representation of Black women. And as I've studied history, to all the sisters out there, God bless the strength that you all have had. I've seen it growing up, where I grew up. There was only one family that had a man in that household, but everybody else, we were all raised by single Black women, strong Black women. And as I began to study history, I could see you over and over and over again. But whenever we talk Black history, rarely do we talk about you. So I am currently doing a Black Heritage Day 5, which is 366 days of Black women. And I just want to share with you just some of the people that comes up, because history is happening around us every day. And last Sunday, we watched this young sister, Erin Jackson, become the first Black to win a speed skating medal, and she won the gold medal. But before Erin Jackson won that, the first Black woman to ever win an Olympic gold medal in the Winter Olympics was Vanetta Flowers, and she was part of the 2-woman bobsled team. I got the first Black woman to ever play professional hockey, Blake Bolden. And I used to be on the board of trustees at Clarkson University, which is known for its hockey. And I put Blake Bolden on the day that she scored her first collegiate goal, and that goal was scored against Clarkson University. Michelle Howard, when I was executive director of the National Society of Black Engineers, I did a lot of work with the United States Navy. And I actually had a chance to meet Admiral Howard, but this woman is the highest ranking Black, period, man or woman, in the history of the United States Navy. She is a 4-star admiral, and she was the vice CNO. And if you ever remember the movie, the movie is Captain Phillips and the pirates that were taking over the ship. Admiral Howard was in charge of the military Navy, the U.S. Navy, that took care and rescued Captain Phillips. So very, very powerful sister. For those of us who are interested in art, you may not know Alma Thomas, but I want you to know this. One of her paintings sold for $2.8 million. Okay, fascinating sister, very socially conscious as well, right? Let me see, did I miss something up here? I don't know what's going on here. The first Black woman to ever get, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at something here. But anyway, the first African-American woman to ever get a PhD in this country, Georgina Simpson. And that year that she received her PhD, actually 3 other women received PhDs that year. She, just by the way the graduation took place, she was the first one to actually receive her PhD. Fascinating sister. And for those young sisters today, this is Lauren Simmons. At the time that she was on the trading floor of the U.S. Stock Exchange, she was the youngest, literally probably the only Black woman on the floor at that time. But keep in mind, the first Black woman to ever be on the floor of the U.S. Stock Exchange was a sister named Gail Pinckney Albert. So, but these are some of the things that you'll see in the calendar. And for some reason, I got okay. And then another thing I did with this in talking about Black women, Malcolm X said that, the Black woman is the most disrespected, most trodden down person in America. And so not only am I talking about the contributions, but I'm talking about the trials and tribulations that have befallen our sisters, such as the case of Sharice Francis. So a lot of us have heard about Brianna Taylor or Sandra Bland. Sharice Francis is another sister who was literally murdered by NYPD, and ultimately, because she suffered from a mental illness, police came to their home. They had called for paramedics. Instead, the call was routed to 911. Police came, frightened her, put their weight on, and ultimately killed her, according to the medical examiner. So I have situations like that to talk about the experience of Black women in our community. Most of us know about Mae Jemison being the first Black woman in space. Well, I want you to meet Stephanie Wilson. And to date, no other Black woman has been in space longer than Stephanie Wilson. And per her last mission, she had been in space 42 days, 23 hours, 46 minutes. And right now, she's part of a mission that is supposed to send another landing to the moon, and she's supposed to be a part of that. So, believe it or not, that sister actually be literally moonwalking. Okay. Now, for those of you in Kansas City, I don't need to tell you who Sarah Rector is, right? And so, right there, you have the Rector House, but at one time considered the richest little colored girl in the world. And then finally, and these are just some of the pages, and I'm not going to waste any time telling you about Patricia Bath. That is better left to our founder, Uncle George, who has worked tirelessly to get the recognition to this sister that she so much deserved. But when you think about cataract eye surgery, you should remember Patricia Bath was that sister, but Uncle George will tell you all about it. So this is just a preview of the women. And again, it's going to be 366 days of the things that you're seeing here that cover every category that you could imagine. The first Black dentist, the first Black jockey, you name it, we got them. So I'll look forward to it. Now what I want to do is I want to just let you know what it is that we're going to talk about now. And I've never done a Black History program, and I never will do ever do a Black History presentation without laying homage to the founder of Black History Month, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, because a lot of people mention his name or they don't know how February became Black History Month. And I remember when our comedians used to make jokes about it. They gave us the coldest and the shortest month out of the year. Well, the only reason you make that joke is because you don't know the history of Dr. Woodson. And you know, I heard in the conversation where we were talking about why do we need to know our history? Why should we study Black history? And so one of the things I found is, you know, when I'm talking about Black history, I'm talking about what happened in the past, almost like our history is a dead history. So today I want to take a different approach, and I'll tell you a little bit later why I'm taking this approach. But I want to tell you how understanding what happened yesterday gives you the wherewithal to make better options today. So our history from yesterday, the reason I feel like we need to understand it is because it is a living history, and we need that living history to make some choices, because I'm watching some choices that are being made that are absolutely, they're embarrassing to me. And I'm trying not to use different words to say how upset I am about it. So we're going to talk about that. In particular, I want to talk about Juneteenth. I know a lot of folks are happy that they made Juneteenth a national holiday. Juneteenth, what they did was an absolute embarrassment to our history. And I'll justify that. It is not a subjective opinion. I will make a very objective argument about that. I want to talk about what's happening with Brian Flores and to understand that there was a brother yesterday, Kurt Flores. So I want to talk about Kurt Flores' history and how it applies to Brian Flores today. And then talk about, you know, this nonsense that's taking place. Even with the Confederate flag, I've been watching, you know, I've watched over the past some of our influences and how they dealt with the Confederate flag, which is a complete embarrassment. I think the only reason you do things like that, some of these choices that are being made, is because we do lack that understanding of who we are as a people. We lack that knowledge of our history. So with that being said, let's talk about the history of Black History Month. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson was born in 1875 in New Canton, Virginia. And for the first 20 years of his life, the brother could not go to school because he was born to enslaved parents. And so he had to stay at home and work. And so he became self-taught. He finally got a chance to go to school when he was 20 years old. It took him less than 2 years to graduate. And then ultimately, he ended up going to Harvard, and he got a PhD from Harvard. And at the time he got his PhD, he was the first Black who was a direct descendant of slaves who had ever received a PhD from Harvard. I didn't say he was the first Black to get a PhD from Harvard. I said he was the first Black who was a direct descendant of those enslaved to get a PhD from Harvard. And Dr. Woodson founded two organizations for the promotion of African American history. One was the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and the other one was Associated Publishers. And these two organizations, they had four goals. One was to promote the writing and research of Black history. Number two, okay, that's something. I don't know how that came up, but anyway, we'll leave that alone. So these are the 4 reasons why Dr. Woodson founded those 2 organizations to promote writing and research, to promote the, hold on, family, something is going on here. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna stop this and try to find out exactly what I got going here. I don't know what that is. So with that being said, he founded what we now know as Black History Month. The first observance of it was 1926. And when he did that, he started the second week in February in honor of 2 men, Abraham Lincoln, who was born on February 12th, and Frederick Douglass, who was born on February 14th. But Frederick didn't know the exact date of his birthday, as did not many of our enslaved ancestors. But his mother used to call him My Little Valentine. So Frederick Douglass chose February 14th as his birthday. So in honor of those 2 men, Dr. Woodson in 1926 chose the second week in February. It was called Negro History Week. They replaced the word Negro with the word Black, and it became Black History Week all the way up until the mid-70s, when it then became recognized as a month-long celebration to celebrate Black history for the entire month. So with that being said, I want to try to go back in here. Now, I want us to understand, right now there's all this talk around critical race theory, and trust and believe, family, any discussions about for or against critical race theory, as it applies to us studying Black history, is nothing more than a deflection. To study the experience of Black folks in this country and try to hide behind critical race theory, that is the opponents who have forever wanted to keep us through a policy of omission, keep us out of the history books. And there's a distinct reason why they don't want that. Number one, America she's very much ashamed of what she did, and she ought to be. She absolutely ought to be. That's number one. Number two, the purpose of history is to make one think critically. Make you think critically about that vote, make you think critically about your actions, make you think critically about your participation in the development of this country, to have a voice in this country. There are members of America who would just as well that you keep thinking that your vote don't matter. And I want to tell you this, if you don't think your vote don't matter, why do you think they're working so damn hard to take it away from you? I'll tell you why. Because you don't understand the price that was paid. You don't understand the price that was paid. If you don't think education is all of that, that's why we get into a situation where we can't have the things that we want in life, because we don't value education. Why don't we value it? Because we don't know the price that was paid. I'm gonna stay away from all of the subjectivity. But when I tell you about what's known about our history, here's a placard in Virginia, was supposed to mark the location of when the first Blacks came to this country in Jamestown in 1619, 20 and some odd Blacks that were supposed to come there. You see where I got that yellow line? It says that the U.S. abolished slavery in 1863. Now, the reason they said 1863 is because they were saying that the United States abolished slavery on January 1st, 1863, when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This is the United States government. This is the government put this plaque up there. So you mean to tell me that nobody in the government, and all that it takes to issue this placard, nobody checked that? Nobody understood that what ended chattel slavery in this country happened on December 6, 1865, when Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment? But we'll get to that, okay? And that's me talking to some folks about it, about my deal. But now here's the thing about understanding history. I couldn't let that go. So I called up the Department of Resources and I said to them, that placard you have is wrong. And so, Mr. Mack, what do you mean it's wrong? I said, you got down there that slavery ended in 1863. The U.S. abolished slavery in 1863. Nothing could be further from the truth. Somewhere, somebody got looking into it and said, you know what? He's correct. And so here's the new, I believe this is the new placard. Yeah, this is the new placard that they put up. And now they say the U.S. abolished slavery in 1865. But if they wanted to be exact, Just like now, you're exact about when the first blacks came here in August of 1619, August 20th of 1619, if you want to be absolutely exact. Well, instead of saying that the United States abolished slavery in 1865, you should have said it was December 6, 1865, to be exact about it. So again, when you understand our history, you can correct these things that are going on today. So even though that happened yesterday, if I didn't say anything, then our history is a dead history. But because I said something, I made yesterday alive and well today, and it benefited us today because it is important to get it right about what's going on in our history. Now, I said that I was bothered about Juneteenth. The reason I'm bothered about Juneteenth is because today we're talking about the fact that Black Lives Matter. Do we think that Black lives just start mattering? And the reason why I got a problem, I don't know, somebody's saying that something's going on. All right, I'm not going to worry about it. The reason why I have a problem with Juneteenth is this. Today we're saying Black Lives Matter. When they passed the legislation for Juneteenth, they started to, because there have been so many myths, let's call them lies about Juneteenth. And when I say lies, I'm saying that those things exist because we as a people don't know our history. We don't know it. We've said things like Juneteenth represented the end of slavery, that those of our ancestors in Galveston, they were the last blacks enslaved, and that they didn't get the word for 2.5 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. See, all of those things are wrong. Juneteenth, number one, did not end slavery. Those enslaved in Galveston were not the last blacks enslaved. And the fact that they got the word 2.5 years late. See, family, I'm just asking you to just use your common damn sense right now. See, when the Civil War was fought, the Civil War was fought over one issue. It was fought over slavery. Those 11 states that seceded from the Union, they left to protect that institution. Okay? So when they left, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, when those 11 states left, they formed their own government. They called themselves the Confederate States of America. So whatever Lincoln said, it didn't matter to them. So when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, you don't think that our people knew about it? Of course we knew about it. But what were we going to do? Massa, the president of that other country done said we's free. Now let us go. He would have just, you just would have took one step towards freedom. He shot you right in the ass, and you know he would have shot you there. So it wasn't about us knowing 2.5. We didn't get the word for 2.5 years late. Of course we knew. But that wasn't going to do it. So now, in case you think that this is just my opinion, tell you what, let's take a look at, this is some state legislature that was passed by the state of Kentucky, because Kentucky wanted to recognize Juneteenth. Now, in their legislation, Kentucky is about to tell you all the truths. Look at that first bullet, what it says. Whereas most citizens believed that the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863 ended slavery. However, the proclamation only applied to states which seceded from the Union. It did not apply to Kentucky. And that's going to be very important, family, as we go on. But even that, those first words, you believe that the Emancipation did that. No, it didn't. And Kentucky knew it didn't. So that's why they wrote that. The next thing they said, I don't want you to worry about the second blue dot. Oh, well, okay, let's pay attention to the second blue dot too. Whereas by the time of the 13th Amendment, when it was ratified in December of 1865, December 6th, 1865, because Georgia became the 27th state, there were 36 states in the Union. And according to your civics class, you need 3/4 of those states to ratify a proposal, and you need 2/3 of the Congress to approve it. Well, you got 2/3 of the Congress on January 31st, 1865. 36 states, you needed 27 states to ratify that proposal. On December 6th, 1865, Georgia became the 27th state. That's why they say, whereas by the time the 13th Amendment was ratified December of 1865, only 9 states, Kentucky among them, still clung to the institution. What's 9 plus 27? That's that 36 I was telling you about, right? And then they go on to tell you, not only did we not ratify the 13th Amendment, it says that, look, Kentucky passed legislation prohibiting the importation of slaves for sale in the state. But now look at what they say on this next red dot. Whereas the Civil War ended April 1865, April 12th, 1865 to be exact, but bondage did not end for approximately 225,000 Kentucky slaves until the 13th Amendment was ratified on December 18th, 1865. It wasn't ratified on December 18th, 1865. When Georgia ratified it, when Georgia met the requirement, it was now that it was registered as official. But when Georgia ratified it, that meant your two conditions got met. But I'm not going to play with the semantics of that. What I want you to understand is this. December of 1865, June 19th, 1865. If these and Juneteenth was supposed to be the last slaves, what are they telling you in Kentucky? No, there were 225,000 Black folks still enslaved in Kentucky. So when we pass legislation to say, and what are we trying to say? Well, we want to finally pay tribute to the end of America's original sin by recognizing Juneteenth. No, there were 225,000 of my ancestors still enslaved under your original sin, and they didn't get freedom until December 6, 1865. But think about all the Black folks who walked out up there with no knowledge or some other alternative. How could you think Black lives just started mattering? No, they didn't. Black lives have always mattered. Now, look at this last bullet. Whereas June 19th, 1865 is considered the date. They didn't say it was the date. They said it's considered the date because Kentucky done told you all the way through their document, everything that I'm telling you now. So I'm not being subjective in what I'm telling you. I'm telling you this is what history says. Now, let's look at the state of Washington. It was a Black woman that introduced this legislation, and she is about as sorry as it gets. And I'm not saying she's sorry because she's a Black woman. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying she's sorry because even when we tried to teach her, tried to tell her what she was doing was wrong, she was so caught up in her ego, trying to get political favor, not giving a damn about our history, about the sacredness of our history. She steadily pushed this on. See, there's a difference between ignorance and stupid. Ignorance is that you don't know. Stupid is you know and you still do wrong. She was flat stupid. I ain't got nothing good for her right now. So this is the legislation that she proposed. That the legislature finds it on June 19th, 2.5 years later, after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and 2 months after the end of the Civil War, news finally reached. See there, that lie go again. You see the lie? There it goes again. Now, look at what she says here. The legislature in the state of Washington intends to designate Juneteenth as a state legal holiday to celebrate the end of chattel slavery. So according to this legislation in the state of Washington, of which there were a lot of Black legislators that signed on to it, Black legislators, this is why it's important to know your history, family, so that you don't embarrass us today, and you don't embarrass 225,000 of our ancestors who were still enslaved when you trying to just get a political marble in your pocket. Were they the only ones? No. See, they took their lead from Trent Lott. Trent Lott was a senator from my state, from Mississippi. See, in 1977, the Republicans decided they wanted to recognize Juneteenth. The damn Republicans. This is in Congress, family. Look at what it says. The headline alone says it. Juneteenth, Independence Day. As if Juneteenth is our Independence Day. How could we be free when there was 225,000 still left in Kentucky? Oh, and by the way, slavery was still practiced in Delaware. And on top of all of that, the Emancipation Proclamation is an executive order. An executive order is not the law of the land, family. The constitutional amendments are the law of the land. So slavery was still legal in this country after June 19th, 1865. But look at what the Congress of the United States said. And J.C. Watts, see, this came out of the Senate. J.C. Watts was over in the House doing this Jerry Lewis nonsense. Now, here's what happened. And I'm going to be as quick as I can. Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. That applied to 11 states that seceded from the Union. Okay. There were 4 states that never left the Union. That were slave states: Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. Now, when Virginia seceded from the Union, there were 48 counties in the western part of the state that didn't want secession. So those 48 counties applied for statehood. So during the Civil War, West Virginia became a state, and West Virginia became the 5th slave state. But according to the Emancipation Proclamation, those who Lincoln deemed free were only in states in rebellion against the Union. And these 5 states, slavery was still very much legal. So before the Civil War ended, Maryland abolished slavery, their state legislature. Missouri abolished slavery. West Virginia abolished slavery. But Kentucky and Delaware, oh, no, no, no. They said, we're not doing that. So they held on to it. So finally, the proposal was made to Congress, and Lincoln was the architect behind it. He got the Congress to approve it. 2/3 of the Congress approved it on January 31st, 1865. Then all of a sudden, see, this is what it looks like. This is what the map looks like. Those states that are blue, those are all the free states. Those states in gray, those are the 11 states that rebelled against the Union. Those states in red, those were the slave states that never rebelled from the Union, in which slavery was still very much legal. Okay. Now, I've given you all of that. I need you to understand what 225,000 look like. See, that's a picture of the March on Washington on August 28, 1963. At the time, considered the largest protest in the history of this country. While the folks in Congress this year wanted to say that Juneteenth ended slavery, this marks the end of America's original sin. That's how many of our ancestors were still in chattel slavery. Shit ain't worth celebrating to me like that. I'm down with Juneteenth, make no mistake about it. As a national holiday to mark the end of America's original sin, I ain't down with that lie. I'm not down with that. Now, and that's a page from the calendar talking about the 13th Amendment on December 6th. And I'm gonna tell you this, on every December 6th, I am never shopping with no other group of people. I ain't shopping with white folks, Hispanic folks, Asian folks. I'm only shopping with Black folks on that day, because that's how I'm going to celebrate Black Freedom and Economics Day, is what I call it. And I ain't got no shame in that. And I don't need the government to recognize it. I don't need you to tell me, oh, Carl, we think it's a good idea that you're gonna spend money. I don't care what you think. I don't care if don't nobody else do it. I hope some of y'all would do it and have a consciousness to remember our ancestors on December 6th. That is a very special day in our history. That is the day that all of us, chattel slavery ended for us in this country. And I'm going to celebrate during the holiday season of spending only with Black businesses. Now, on December 7th, I'll spend with everybody else. On December 5th, I'll spend with anybody. But on December 6th, Black dollars. That's all I'm spending with, unapologetic. And I wish one of you called me up and be like, well, I can't believe you ain't. Yeah, I said that. I ain't never shopping with nobody but Black folks on December 6th. Okay? Period. Now, that may be what that did. Okay. Now, this little situation, and what I got, give me 2 minutes, give me 5 minutes, family. I'm gonna bring you to the end of this thing. This little situation with Brian Flores. See, part of where my problem is with the Black NFL players today. See, I remember when Colin Kaepernick, and Black athletes we've had a long history of standing up. Remember when Ali stood up and we had that little Ali summit, when Jim Brown called together a lot of the prominent Black players and they surrounded Ali and said, we are my brother's keeper. Now, when it came to Colin Kaepernick, that brother stood for the right thing, or in this case, kneeled for the right thing. And by and large, I know it was some that kneeled with him, but by and large, NFL players left that brother hanging. He never, ever should have had what happened to him happen to him. Now they want to tell me about money and this and that. Well, let's go back in history. I want you to go back to December 24th, 1969. See, back during that time, in every professional sports, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, every sport, the owners had what they call the reserve clause. And what that meant is that if they drafted you, they own the rights to you in perpetuity. For as long as you played those professional sports, they own you. So there was a black man by the name of Curt Flood. And I did a video about this. And I got to tell you, the reason why I'm doing the presentation this way is because there was members of his son reached out to me. His son said, "Thank you, brother, for remembering my daddy." Touched me. Okay. Flood, Curt. This is the letter that Curt Flood wrote to Bowie Kuhn. He said, "Mr. Commissioner, after 12 years in the major leagues, I do not feel that I'm a piece of property to be bought and sold irrespective of my wishes. I believe that any system which produces that result violates my basic rights as a citizen and is inconsistent with the laws of the United States and of several states." He said, "It is my desire to play baseball in the 1970s. I want to play ball, and I'm capable of playing. I have received a contract from the Philadelphia club, but I believe I have the right to consider offers from other clubs before making this decision." Curt Flood stood by himself. He took his case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. He lost 5-3. In 1975, baseball honored free agency. Today, in sports, everywhere is free agency. Baseball today has not placed Curt Flood in the Hall of Fame. And we're talking about a player who won 2 world titles, a number of Golden Gloves, voted to the All-Star team. But I'm gonna say this to you, family. If you think that what Jackie Robinson did was something, what Curt Flood did transcended all sports. Every sport ought to have Curt Flood in their Hall of Fame. Pro football ought to have Curt Flood in the Hall of Fame. Basketball ought to have Curt Flood in the Hall of Fame. And every black athlete, not just black, every athlete today who is making millions and millions of dollars because of free agency, it all goes back to a black man by the name of Curt Flood. That's who it goes back to, this brother. So now, here's our brother, Brian Flores. The NFL is over 100 years old. Men lie, women lie. Numbers don't lie. And them numbers about what happened to this brother is as clear as it needs to get. But because he's now filed suit, which had never been done in 100 years. And let me just tell you this about the Rooney Rule, historically speaking. See, we listen to the Rooney Rule as though the owners of the Pittsburgh Steelers felt benevolent and felt like it's time to do the right thing. So let's bring minorities in when we do the hiring. Like he just did it from the goodness of his heart. Au contraire. Au contraire. See, the NFL started in 1920. And when it started, the first black to play in the NFL was a man named Fritz Douglas Pollard. He not only played in the NFL, but Fritz Douglas Pollard was also a coach. He coached the Akron Indians. He not only played, but he coached with them and coached them to the World Championship. After he finished coaching, there was not another black coach in the NFL until 1988 with Art Shell. And there ain't been but a handful of them since then. So the numbers are true about what the NFL does. As black folks, professionals, how many times do you think we done been to interviews at the coaxing of America, only so that they could validate the process and say, "Oh, but we interviewed a black candidate. You had no intentions, no true intentions of hiring me." This is what Brian Flores is saying. And don't we dare sit there and act like we don't know about this. Black folk, we know. White folks, y'all know too. Y'all know too. So what he's saying is true. But because this sister, somehow, what did she do? Former U.S. Attorney General, under the man behind her, President Obama, the first black POTUS, she now retires out of public service life, goes and becomes a partner in some law firm. And what does the NFL do? They pull the oldest trick in the book. They say, well, let's go back and get that firm because they've represented us in the past. And especially because they got this black woman, Loretta Lynch. So now she is going to defend the NFL against 100+ years of this type of racial discrimination. Now, I'm gonna tell you something, family. I'm spiritual. Granted, I might be a Sunday school dropout, but if I'm spiritual, I do remember Judas. I don't care how much money you would have gave me. You could, and I'm sure the NFL probably put a blank check in front of them. I would have told them, you better take your 30 dirty pieces of silver and get away from me, man. Do you know that if I take this case, they gonna revoke my black card? I won't be invited to the black family reunion. My Kool-Aid is no longer red. That's what you're doing. Loretta, I had you in the all-women's calendar. And when you did what you did, baby girl, I put you on the cutting floor. I had to take you out. I'm so disappointed in you. I never would have done that. Now, in case you're wondering, see, this is why I know I never would have done it. I remember when I was in Seattle and they were killing black men at the hands of unlawful law enforcement. That picture of me getting arrested, I was an engineer with King County. I got arrested protesting King County. I didn't do it because I want to be a martyr. I didn't do it because I want to be a hero. I did it because I understood the price that others paid that was much deeper than the price I'm gonna have to pay. I was recently married, had a big mortgage, just bought a house. Joshua was 1 year old. I knew what was at stake, but I knew that our ancestors, see, this is the history they don't want you to do. They don't want you to have this. They don't want you to have this kind of fight into you that'll make you stand up against voter suppression, that'll make you say, look, if you can't recognize Kurt Flood, I ain't watching pro baseball. If you go after Brian Flores, to hell with football. What you did with Kaepernick, I ain't buying none of your merchandise. I'm not supporting that no more. And now white folks want to start talking about cancel culture. You know how many black entertainers, Colin Kaepernick got canceled. You didn't say nothing about that. See, this level of critical thinking, this is what they're most afraid of. That's why they're pushing that CRT nonsense on you. And you sitting there trying to argue CRT. Ain't nothing to argue with that. They just don't want you to know who you are, black folk. Now, I'm in my feelings right now. And for those of you who might be a little put off with me right now, don't fucking call me no more, then. Because right now I am in my feelings. I can't really control what's going on now. So I'm gonna end this. Now I got something else, but I do want to show you this. I want to show you this before I go. See this? This pisses me off too. Kanye West. Slavery was a choice. Now, he gonna wrap himself in the Confederate flag. Huh? Look at this. Look at this. Ludicrous. And then they want to sit around and tell you, I'm gonna tell you something. Don't tell me you're trying to take the flag back. That ranks right up there with you trying to glorify the word nigger. See, when you don't know your history, you can do stupid shit like that. You can do that kind of stupid shit. And then they can sit with you all because you don't know. And somehow y'all can have a philosophical discussion about it. As elders in the community, we should take them youngins behind the woodshed and straighten them out. We don't whoop them out of hate. We don't whoop them out of love. We'll whoop some sense in them. Now, just so you sure, let me move past this piece. I don't want to see this. You see that question? Who the vice president of the Confederacy? Alexander Stephens. Alexander Stephens wrote a speech called the Cornerstone Speech. So just in case you think that they can take the Confederate flag back, in this Cornerstone Speech, Alexander Stephens told you exactly what the Confederate States was all about, what the Confederate government was all about. He says the new Constitution, meaning the Constitution of the Confederacy. I told you they formed their own government. The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions related to our peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. And this was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Late rupture, that's secession. The revolution, that was the Civil War. Let me just go to this. I want you to go to this second, this big red one down here. Look at what he said. So Kanye West, I'm ending it right here, Mike. This is the last thing I'm gonna say. Kanye West says this: when you put that Confederate flag on you, Kanye, and ludicrous, when y'all put that Confederate, when y'all drape that all over you, I want you to understand, this is what they said. Alexander Stevens said this. The state of Mississippi said this. Florida, Texas, all of them 11 states said this. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery is subordination to the superior race. That is your natural and normal condition. And our new government is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. That's why I want to know my history. So that when I see this nonsense happening today, it's not a dead history. That history empowers me to make change today. And with that said, I'm done. Mike, Wells, thank you guys so much. I'm sorry that I went over. My bad.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate your love and energy.
Yep.
We thank Dr. Mack for that informational speech.
Shit wasn't informational, man. That was history.
That was history.
My bad. I'm fucking with you. I mean, I'm messing with you. I'm sorry, Wells. I'm in my feelings. Let me get off there before I get you thrown out.
Well, yeah, this is gonna be my last time talking to you guys as an MC. I believe that learning our history is important, and finding your passion is the goal within engineering and STEM. Just be the best that you can be. You're all awesome. I'm glad I was your MC for the evening, and I would like to introduce the person who introduced me to engineering, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. William Well.
Thank you, Tony. Man, I apologize, everybody. You thought you were coming for a Black History showcase, and you actually showed up to a family reunion. Dr. Mack, hey man, I appreciate you. You wouldn't charge us. You gave us gave the young people calendars. We really appreciate you, Tony. Man, I'm just happy for everything that you're doing, watching you continue to shine. I know you don't want to tell everybody about your rental car business, but you should put that plug in the chat because these people they travel, right? And this is going to be archived. Dr. Taborn, again, thank you for coming in and letting the STEAM Village be a part of that wonderful STEM City USA platform that you're developing, and we're glad to be a part and help to develop it. Ray Daniel, Ray, thank you. I know you like Williams calling me again to moderate, but you're the best. You and Mrs. Newsom are the best at storytelling. We really appreciate you. And you did an amazing job. Our panelists, Uncle George, Ms. Antonia, Ms. Mosley, Ms. Camila, Mr. Boswell, Kevin, all of you, thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm just happy to be on that Nsbe Fact team and to continue working with you. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Google Fiber. Most of all, I want to thank the attendees that have stayed and came to the program. Angela Wildflower, I know you're not here, but thank you. You're 7 hours ahead of us, which means it was the middle of the night and we tried to make it work. I think we just found a new market to try to get some broadband to. So with that, Google Fiber, again, thank you. Dominic Hammonds, we're having Community STEM Day May 5th, May 6th. We're the Nsbe CEOs coming to Kansas City. We're going to be meeting with academia. Tony is Anthony Gann, our MC. All of the panelists, the co-founder, they show the impact that Nsbe has, and a lot of our parents and a lot of our students see it. People think about engineering in the sphere of mechanical. This is a socio-economical engineer, and everybody on this planet is an engineer because we all gonna have problems. And that's what engineers do. They solve problems to make life better for everyone else. Professor Lupino, UMKC, our Vistas, Andy, Jaime, Gabe, Justin, we appreciate you. I'm muted. With that, I'd like to also thank HNTB for providing some calendars so that our young people can make some money to go into their kettle, their pots, so that they can continue to grow, shine, think critically, and problem solve. We hope that you'll stay. I mean, everybody knows about Hidden Figures. We're going to have a quick break, music by Dominic Hammonds, a quick video from our sponsor, Google Fiber, and our Digital KC. And then we're going to show this is an amazing award-winning docu-pit. It studies 5 scientists, engineers, and technologists. One of them, the lady was hired as a computer in 1941. And you're going to find out that in World War II, in the Korean War, we developed some amazing technology that made kind of led to the outcome of the positive outcome of that war. No war is positive, but we darn sure didn't want the bad guys to win. So that's going to air as soon as we have a little break. Let people go to get a drink, go to the restroom. Plug your laptop to your TV with HDMI cable or screencast it, because I guarantee you're going to want to see it. It's a great, great, great film, and it's our history. So with that, thank you all for coming, and we'll go to the music, and the movie will start directly after. Oh, sorry, don't forget, you can do the QR code, get that calendar, Black Heritage Day 4 calendar for $20. Again, Dr. Mack, your amazing brother, I thank you. You continue to answer the call when I call you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your mentorship. Remind me a lot of my late father. My late father, he passed on February 1st, which is the first day of Black History Month. But as I told you, he called balls and strikes without regard to who was pitching and who was in the batter's box. And you can't do anything but appreciate somebody that's like that. So with that, music, commercial, and then movie. Thank you all for your time.
What's going on, y'all? It's your boy, international recording violinist Dominic Hammonds here. And first off, I want to thank aSTEAM Village for having me a part of their 2nd annual Black History Month showcase. I'm very excited to be a part of this event. And also, this serves as a sneak peek to my upcoming show in Kansas City, Thursday, May 5th at the Gym Theater for the Nsbe Junior Pre-College Initiative Celebration, y'all. So I'm excited to be a part of that event as well. But in the meantime, I got 2 numbers for y'all, man. I got 2 songs for y'all. So I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Okay, Google, turn on living room light.
Okay, turning light on.
I got into gaming as a child. I realized I was good at it after I started streaming maybe like a year in, and a lot of people enjoyed my content. It feels really good. It gives me motivation to keep going, and I pretty much pull my inspiration from anywhere. It can be a game, it can be an anime, but also the city itself is just really beautiful, and it makes me want to go out and add Charlotte into my content. So Google Fiber allows me to be able to game and stream at the same time. I can also watch other people's streams while I game. Some people can't do that, like with other services where you can only have one thing on at a time because of your speed. I think more recently, streamers and women gamers that look like me are starting to get a little bit more recognition than they were when I first started a couple years ago. The advice I would give is to don't get discouraged. If you have an idea, don't sit on it, act on it, because you're going to feel better knowing that you got an idea out and you won't regret having your content out there. I'm Morgan, I live in Charlotte, and Google Fiber lets me share my creativity with the world. Yes, it's time to go. We've been on for 4 hours now. Okay, Google.
Digital KC Now brings broadband internet access and the educational support needed to utilize the internet and its resources to neighborhoods, while building a community of knowledge workers. Educating people on how to use the internet is key to improving lives, access to healthcare and education, enhancing business performance, and creating opportunity. For details on joining the Digital KC Now workforce, please visit digitalkcnow.org. Digital
The guard at the gate refused to let me in the building. He just said, "We don't hire colored hair, period. Now get off the property or I'll have you arrested."
You took it in a variety of fields on the mere chance that you could pass and get a position.
But we must remember that at this time the war was about to start. The country was gearing up really for war, even before we got into war.
I can remember exactly how many blacks there were. Just me.
Well, they did have a few people cleaning the buildings, but no secretaries, no other technical people. That was the way of the world in the United States at that time.
For them, and what I was assigned to teach some of these people, these new people that are coming in, to expose them to electronics.
When I graduated, the Depression was still on, and I was only 19 years old. So I found I had to persevere. I tried getting teaching jobs, and I guess I looked a little too young, or else they didn't have any openings, but I kept trying. I worked all kinds of different jobs: farm labor, carpenter's assistant, door-to-door sales. Then I got a couple of substitute teacher's jobs. It was clear I wasn't going to get a good teaching job, so I told my parents that I was going to Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio. I could apply for scholarships and fellowships as a first honor student. I didn't have the slightest idea that I wouldn't get in. Ohio State wrote back and said, "You will not have to apply separately for admission. You are admitted on the basis of this application."
It seemed to be a given that I would go to college if I had brains enough to do it. My father put it this way: you'd better go to college, and if you go to college, it better be one that's free. So I went to Hunter College and received a degree in statistics with a business minor. It took lots of science courses because math and science were the easy ones to me. I didn't have stars in my eyes. I knew it was an obligation to train myself to have a job. That was the goal. Therefore, I built math and science into everything I was taking because I could use that later. You took civil service exams to try to get something going. Naturally, I took the one in statistics. So they sent the communication out to you in response to the rating you got on the test. This was the only game in town as far as college graduates from the city were concerned. The war was on and everybody was either going off to it or getting civilian jobs.
I went to New York University, Washington Square College, and worked nights. My family helped financially, of course. I did reasonably well at NYU. There were some teachers who were not, how should I say it, not openly unfair. For 5 years after graduating with a degree, I spent the whole time looking for a job in physics or a related field such as photography. In those 5 years, I never got an interview. The reason was because of my race, and no effort was made by employers to conceal that fact. Jobs then were mainly gotten through employment agencies and ads in the newspapers. I would reply to the ads in the newspapers, and occasionally I would get back a letter from the employer saying, "Come in for an interview." I'd go in for an interview. Usually there would be others there, and someone would come to me eventually and say, I told Mr. So-and-so you were here, and he says there's no point in your waiting. I could write a book about these types of incidents.
And a lot of fellows that I knew in the radio club at school and privately in the ham radio connection were working at Fort Monmouth now. So they sort of gave me an introduction into what to do, where to go, and so forth. So I applied there, and then the person who interviewed me there recommended that I take an exam, civil service exam.
Country, and we went down to Signal Corps in the Squire Lab and went to personnel and said, I took this exam. Oh, we were so glad that you came down because you did well, and we wanted a young, let's say, young, energetic, ambitious engineer to replace these older gray-haired men who are not in a position or able or willing to study the new microwave radar.
There were 3 classes of civilian vacancies. Radio mechanic, RM1, if you had no college training. Engineering aide, SP1, requiring some college training. And engineer, P1, requiring a degree. You could be a physicist or you could be a chemist and still receive the P1 classification.
I had filed with civil service for a job. The examination was an unassembled exam at the P2 level. These exams were usually given at P1 or lower. But as time went on, they started hiring people on war services indefinite basis rather than on a career basis. I read an article in the Pittsburgh Courier written by a professor who wanted it known that one of his best Black students was getting a job at the Signal Corps laboratory. I said, good, that's where I'm going. At least I won't be alone. And if they fire me, they've got to fire 2 of us.
Didn't have time. They were trying to find somebody who had these requirements are efficient. You got to go to work. And because of the fact of the war, for the first time, they brought Negroes into the civil service jobs at professional level, technical jobs. Prior to that, there was one, as far as we knew, there was one Negro who worked at the Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C., was the only Negro we knew. He was a chemist, too, I think, that we knew who was working for the federal government on a professional job, technical job.
I came from a society that was very segregated in North Carolina. Thinking I was coming north and find myself into a society that was open, I found a society here that was just as segregated as it was in North Carolina. They use subterfuges and things of that sort to sort of camouflage things a little bit. It was just as bad as was the theaters, the restaurants, and everything else around here, the churches, the YMCA. All of them were segregated. There was even a separate YMCA on the west side of town for us.
Well, so I was familiar with this part of the country and problems as far as race goes. I didn't want to come down the Jersey coast at night because if I was getting off in the wrong town, I knew it was not a place for a young black man to be at night. So I got off with the soldiers in Red Bank and caught the local bus with them. And the bus, when it got to Fort Mama's gate, went in the Fort Mama and started dropping off at different places. I told her I want to go to the Square Lab. Dropped me off right in front of the Square Lab and caught another bus there that took me over to Camp Evan. And when they gave me the person to process me in, she turned out to be a friend, was a young lady whose last name was Johnson. I don't remember her first name, sitting at this typewriter. So I could ask her all the questions I want to ask about race problems and whatnot, you see. She was black. I walk in, now that's where I see Dr. Zoll. And Dr. Zoll sent me to a man named Ballard, who was going to be my first straw boss. And when I got to Ballard was quite disturbed. I didn't understand what his problem was. The problem was that I was black. And he knew that any new employee who's coming in here with a bag in his hand and doesn't have a car, he's got a transportation problem, and he's got to make sure this man has somewhere to sleep tonight and somewhere to eat.
After the train ride to Red Bank, New Jersey, I took a bus from the railroad station, which deposited me in front of Squire Hall. At the reception desk, I gave my name. The gentleman there checked against his list and then asked me to wait a few minutes. He made a phone call, and then a secretary came down to take me in to see the section chief of the Sound and Light section, Dr. Anderson. He took me in to see Dr. Fred Daniels, who was a unit chief, and I was assigned to work with him. There were just 3 technical people working with him. After about a week, Dr. Daniels assigned me to work with a fellow who was in charge of a submarine locator project. Sonar. You heard me right. It's the Army Signal Corps. What's the Signal Corps doing locating submarines? Prior to Pearl Harbor, the responsibility for U.S. harbor defense within the 3-mile limit was given to the Army. The Navy took it over at 3 miles and went on from there. This sonar equipment was specially designed, and it had been delivered from the manufacturer in Massachusetts just about the time I arrived at Fort Monmouth. I assisted with the installation of the equipment out in the harbor near Seabright, New Jersey. We began operating it with the objective of evaluating its performance. There were 3 ways of making calculations back then. One was with pencil and paper. The second way was with a slide rule. In the third, you used a Marchand or a Monroe mechanical calculator. I worked on this assignment from early October until after the bombing of Pearl Harbor that December. Up to this time, I was still a civilian. The next thing that came down the pike was induction in the services. I had 3 brothers who were already in the services, and I couldn't possibly step aside. I was formally inducted in February '44 and sent to the Air Force. I did basic training at Gulfport Field in Mississippi. On the way to Gulfport Field, I was on a troop train that had a number of soldiers. There were black soldiers and there were white soldiers. There were prisoners of war from Europe, and we were all on the same troop train, of course in separate cars. When the train pulled into Birmingham, Alabama, I distinctly remember the front cars were separated from the rear cars. Some were moved forward a few yards from the others. I presume this was normal for that station. The troop train sat for quite a while. First, all the white troops lined up on the platform and went into the station to be fed. This took some time. After the white soldiers were all fed, the prisoners of war were lined up and taken in. After the prisoners of war were put back on the train, it was coupled together again and started off. We, the black soldiers, got boxed lunches on the train. I'll never forget it. I never will.
But I remember the first days, if you will. It turned out to be about 25 or 30 females who were in the same position I was in, and we had all been directed to the radio direction finding branch of the Eatontown Signal Laboratories. And I know for one thing is we came in, we were to report a certain time on a certain day. And of course we staggered in, but we were sitting in the secretary's office, this whole huge mob of females. And you could tell immediately that they weren't prepared to see us or deal with us. You know, we took them by surprise. Number one, that we were females, you know, and number two, we were professionals. People were being assigned very rapidly. They were losing personnel rapidly, and they were being assigned personnel rapidly because we were there to replace the engineers and semi-professionals who were being drafted.
That's why they called us JPAs, Junior Professional Assistants. There was also hostility because we were getting big money, so they were under an obligation to make use of us. When we completed the training, they gave us exams and had each of us build our own radio to prove we could handle equipment and make it come out right. Then they published the test scores, and I had the highest. I really didn't know this thing was run by the military until I got into the labs. My first assignment was to assist other engineers in whatever they were doing. We were never on any project that had gone into production. We were always at various stages of experimentation. They were doing work on waveguides. I was experimenting on the discriminator section. You couldn't design it according to anything they knew of because in the higher ranges, waveguide frequency response changes rapidly. Whole new parameters had to be established. I was to get the best fit by creating it and following intuition, really. It was the kind of thing you felt was contributing to the war effort. In the meantime, I was going to school at night trying to catch up. One day, they picked up a whole busload of us and we went over to Princeton, where they were giving war service courses. Afterward, I went to Rutgers and took a course there. Then I came over to Columbia to take this course in waveguide theory. So I worked day and night because I liked it.
June 1941, and I went to work on the 20th of June 1941, and I was assigned to work for a fellow by the name Marchetti, who became a major later on, and I was courting a young lady at that time, who subsequently has become my bride, and she lived in New York City, and I was worked from Monday. We were working 6 days a week, and then when I got into the group, I found out they were that particular group, which was on the forefront, were working on Sundays, and I couldn't endure that. So I transferred out of Marchetti's group, was assigned to what they call a loop course, where I spent so much time in transportation department, so much time in the supply department, so much time in the drafting department, so much time in the purchasing department, so much time in the engineering and the specification.
We had to test the SCR 268 radio position finders, some of which were out in the field. The SCR 268 was an anti-aircraft radar for gun and searchlight control. Within a week, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. They were detected by these radars, but the results were ignored by the military command because they didn't trust the technology.
This is the SCR 545. It's another step in the development of radar equipment for use in anti-aircraft fire. Like the 268, it seeks out enemy bombers long before they can be seen or heard. But in several important ways, it's a lot better than the 268. First, this 545 can track targets automatically. After you've located a plane and tracked it by hand until the signal is steady and strong, all you have to do is throw a switch and the 545 continues to track the plane by itself.
Not long after this, they began to bring in the new position finders out of the radiation laboratories at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. These were named radar, for radio detection and ranging. The Germans had captured SCR 268s, and they quickly learned how they worked. As one of the bright young engineers now left in the radar section, who was a systems person, I was selected to act as the liaison with the MIT. The efforts at the Signal Corps were applied production engineering. You took the principles and adapted them to physical problems. The new techniques required understanding the new principles, so I periodically came up to MIT to be introduced to the new theories and operations. I'd go back down to Signal Corps and report on these new trends. It was decided that it was necessary to set up test procedures to verify the proper operation of new equipment, and we began to do so. By now, I had reached some kind of prominence in the Signal Corps. I also began to see well-trained Black professionals, men and women, coming in.
The title of our unit became the Theoretical Studies Unit, but it was first called the Radar Sighting Group. Then later somebody decided that we were working for more than just radar sighting, that we were doing mathematical studies for radio propagation and for radar coverage patterns and so forth. We worked with the radar antenna people a lot. I did a paper for the people who were in what ultimately became the Countermeasures Group. At that time, the project was called an IFF beacon, Identification, Friend or Foe. Let's find out who they are before we shoot them. Tom Carroll outlined several problems that needed to be attacked, and he asked Herb Wolf and me to work on one of them. Wolf and I had done a paper on the scattering of electromagnetic waves by ellipsoids and spheres. What we were trying to get was radar cross-sections and radar echoing areas for bodies of different shapes. With Mack Sherman, we did radar coverage patterns and Fresnel zone studies and so forth. That's applying optical methods to compute the radar pattern. We studied diffraction of radar beams or electromagnetic beams over ridges and through trees, the kinds of things that people who operate these radar units have to do out in the field. There was an old radar set around that the antenna people had used. It had a horizontal array that was used for measuring distance, and then a vertical array that you could tilt back and forth to measure elevation. A more modern version of radar that was being used at the time was the so-called PPI, Planned Positioned Indicator. The whole head rotated, and the indicator would tell you where the target was. Technical reports were supposed to be approved by your section chief and then your branch chief. Most of what we were working on was top secret, so they didn't get published, except within the agencies. Usually, you could come to terms with the fellows you were working with about sharing credit. Generally, the way we worked was very informal, and quite a lot I worked alone.
And I was fortunate enough to be assigned to actual electronic work, which we are modifying when they're developing equipment. They find it necessary to update it, modify it, or whatever, and they made an assembly group for making up these little modifications and installing them in the radar. And this is what they were doing in one area. So I got assigned to that group, which was actually hand wiring modules that would be incorporated to change operating conditions in some of the radars. They were bringing in a lot of new employees at this time too. Sort of been a crash employment thing. I mean, people from all walks of life. So at some time we were assigned to teaching some of these people who had never been exposed to electronic that were coming in. So we had classes for them, and I was assigned to teach some of these people, these new people that were coming in, to expose them to electronics.
We haven't even mentioned, for instance, radar, the electronic development that helped save Britain during the decisive weeks of the German aerial blitz. Here's what happened. Ultra-high frequency waves were broadcast into the skies from English defense stations. When enemy planes approached in the darkness or in the fog, these waves would reflect back to the transmitting points, thus giving warning to defenders of Britain, permitting anti-aircraft batteries to swing into action and RAF planes to rise whenever Hitler's bombers attacked, at whatever altitude, from whatever direction. British interceptors were waiting for them. As a result, the Luftwaffe was blasted from the English skies and the tide of war turned.
To learn as much about radar as I could, because our radar set incorporates practically every phase of radar, from the parabolic antenna to sort of electric plug. And so working on radar, and then after I got through that particular phase of the job, I would continue to be assigned to radar. Later down the line, I got back into the labs. I was more or less working with industry. So your work shifted, my work shifted somewhat from internal work to more or less industrial, following of industrial. We did the follow their development work and their testing. And the last thing was acceptance. So you were through watching, observing, and more or less contributing to the evaluation and the performance of electronic equipment that was being built outside or developed outside.
The group I work in, my first 3 weeks when I was with Zoll, I was in a pod that didn't work on the complete radar set. It was work that was more like physicists than engineers. He was physicist. But I didn't like this. And so I transferred after about 3 weeks while I'm still up in Fort Hancock. I transferred to a group that really worked on the radar proper. And then this group, when we had within the group, had men who work on the receiving part of the radar and men who work on the transmitting part. I was with the group that concentrated on the receiving part. And I worked on the radar, that receiving part of the radar, until it was about 1944 that I moved out of that work. Here's a typical problem. One day we get a call. This is a problem, it's gotta be solved. The Panama Canal Zone, I don't know how long it is across the Panama Canal Zone. Fortunately, it was a friendly plane, a United States plane. A plane which wasn't supposed to be come into that Panama Canal Zone without getting permission, had flown halfway through before they found it was flying. So it meant that the radar sets protecting the Panama Canal weren't working right. So they got to find out exactly how to check these radar sets. So we had to build a piece of equipment and I don't know whether they built more than one or not. I know I built one of them and got it to work. And one of the older engineers took that equipment and went down to the Panama Canal. And this piece of equipment, you'd hook it to the radar set, and it would feed into the radar set a signal which would look like the signal which would be generated from an airplane, you see, to see why this, and then tune everything, or everywhere it would be tunable through that set that something was out of tune. And they had to go down there and line up all of those sets so that you could see a plane that was flying through the Panama Canal before you come in there and drop a bomb in those locks or somewhere. That's a typical problem. A model of this set, one of the older models, was on the outer islands of the Hawaiian Islands and picked up the Japanese before they got there. And Wood had given something like 30 or 40 minutes warning time. Had they realized and obeyed that signal. I don't know, but they claim that the soldier, or it seems it was only one soldier watching this set, he actually called back and gave the information, and they didn't believe it. They didn't believe in radar. What's the problem?
We wore security badges to get in the labs in the mornings. Initially, the atmosphere was very cold, but after a while, it got to be like a family. Intimacies developed as you're working side by side, coming and going, eating lunch. Dr. Julia Herrick was there from the Mayo Clinic. Julia lived in the hotel down there, and once or twice she had the girls over. Then there was this guy by the name of Herb Wagner, who was out of Harvard. Captain Giacoletto was the section chief. Scandura and Daniel were under him. Giacoletto came around and looked to see what you were doing. He knew everybody in that lab. He just didn't sit in that office. He was an engineer himself. You might as well have been in a factory. You went in and put your nose to the wheel. You had the freedom to detail your own work, but you had an aspect that you had to follow. You kept logbooks on what you were working. It kept you on track and motivated you to get it to a conclusion that you could justify. The weather station was right next to us. I can see in my mind's eye that long unit we worked in, and we were next to the end, and the weather was at the very end. I'd see them launching those balloons. I became nosy one day and I looked over. They performed all manner of humidity and temperature element tests.
The Air Force had been sending pilots and navigators to England to be trained in the use of navigation equipment that the British had called GEE. They decided to establish GEE training stations back in the United States for crews before they went overseas. One of these training stations was in the process of being set up at Westover Field, Massachusetts. So during the summer of '44, the Air Force reassigned me to Westover Field in Massachusetts because of that document. I helped the crew set up the equipment and taught GEE. We were training flight personnel, pilots, co-pilots, and navigators. All were white. I never saw a black officer in that program. I was at Westover until late '44 when I was transferred to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, Aircraft Engine Research Labs, Instrument Research Section, located at the Municipal Airport in Cleveland, Ohio. If you fly into Cleveland, you can see it. It's a huge installation at one edge of the airport, and one of the few that reported directly to the president. The B-17, for example, was designed by NACA, one of the best designed planes ever executed. After the war, they changed the C to an S, and NACA became NASA. NACA was a top flight research laboratory, and its staff included many nationally and internationally known authorities in the field. These people were easily accessible to the journeyman scientists to provide guidance and assistance with technical problems. It was a really enjoyable military assignment. I was the first black technically trained employee of that laboratory to work there for any length of time. The majority of the technical employees were mechanical engineers whose job it was to make measurements of the various physical parameters involved in their research. Such measurements required the use of electronics, which at that time was still developing. Home radios had only been on the market for 15 years, so it was not anything near the fine art of today. Among other things, they worked on aircraft engine R&D, making measurements at the forefront of the state-of-the-art. The instrumentation section assisted me by building or assembling the necessary equipment. NACA had probably as fine a machine shop as anyone could want at that time. Whatever you wanted, you could either go to the drafting room and have a design drawing made of the device and then send the drawing to the shop, or go into the shop and get a man assigned to you. You talk to him about what you want to do, and he knows what he can make, and so on. When I arrived, they had had a few blacks who were hired as machinists. They came in, stayed a few weeks, then left. It was not a welcome environment at all. I did not allow that to bother me, however. I can remember exactly how many blacks there were, just me. Well, they did have a few people cleaning the buildings, but no secretaries, no other technical people. That was the way of the world in the United States at that time.
El Paso was a point of entry, and that's where the aircraft was stationed. And Alamogordo is about 90 miles away north of it. About this time, they were bringing back V-2s, that's the German ballistic missile that was wreaking so much devastation over London.
Too many of them were going up about 10 miles above sea level and blowing up. One of them went over and landed in Mexico. The base scientists, including Werner von Braun, were trying to find out why. So I went out there a couple of times and realized that we couldn't check anything from the ground. We had to go up in the air and see if we could get some additional data. I flew up over the Rio Grande Mountains, and they fired a missile out of the valley, and it exploded when it came out of the bowl. I was listening to the frequency, set aside for emergency detonation in case something went wrong with the missile. I could hear a Salem, Oregon police station. A little bit later, I hear FM stations playing in the east. On the ground in the valley, the launch people listen to a frequency, hear nothing, and set the detonation equipment to that frequency. Heaviside layer trapping, a propagation phenomena, is causing radio waves from up thousands of miles away to be propagated through the missile's flight path. We had a meeting with the concerned people. A general was there, and I played the tape. I explained that the radio signals would kill the missile every time by jamming the channel. They asked me what could be done, and I told them to make the systems jam-proof. If the Russians know that you're on this frequency, they jam it too. The project should be to make our missiles jam-proof.
And the room came quiet, and the fellow says, you know, I think Mr. Jones is right. So we'll create, instead we'll have, for the moment, we'll have an area frequency coordinator, which will make sure that none of our signals enter, and we'll proceed immediately to making these missiles jam-proof. Now, what do you recommend, Mr. Jones? Well, more precision measurements to know this, to know that, and test. And I didn't see myself living on Alamogordo for offer me a permanent job in the middle of the desert with, I said, no. So I went back and I said, look, this is not for me. I pointed to the problem, but I'm not going to try and do the research for that. It'll take jobs. And so they put an entry into my 201 file of what I did, and they gave me a raise in pay. And they had a substitute for me. They sent in someone else.
When they came to speak to me initially about Project Diana, they knew that I had done radar coverage diagrams. I had done radar sighting, radar echoing areas, or radar cross-sections, and I had done refraction studies in the atmosphere. I had a paper on this with Harold Webb and Eugene Jerema. Colonel John DeWitt was the military head of Evans Laboratory. He had previously tried bouncing radar signals off the moon and failed. E.K. Stodola was the head of the civilian branch that we in theoretical studies were under at that time. I computed a radar cross-section of the moon, a radar coverage pattern, and distance to the moon so that they could tell how big the signal would be when it returned. It turns out that they could have detected the returning signal with the previous computations. However, the distance from the moon would have to be greater. Somehow, they seemed to have discounted the mathematical value of this, but they were thrilled when they found out it was close enough. The press release was sent out in January of 1946 and appeared in the New York Times. First radar signal to be bounced off the moon, but I was not mentioned. A paper was written and published that included most of my work, but I was not mentioned. There were a lot of technicians who cried that they weren't named in that paper either, and that they should have been. I was really annoyed when I heard the news reports had found those statements and later read the paper. All of those who were mentioned in the newspaper and that first published paper landed very good jobs after the war. When they came to Fort Monmouth to take pictures, my office wasn't down in the area where the transmitter and antenna were located. Those who knew they were going to come back for pictures went down to get in them and said nothing to anyone. A lot of people say that the work I was very much a part of, bouncing and receiving radar signals off the moon, heralded the U.S.'s ability to launch manned spacecraft. I don't discourage those comments, My whole feeling is that without radar to the moon, they could still have done it if they had been pressing the business of missiles. Like the V2 that the Germans fired. Just keep building those things and getting better, you could have still done it. But as I say, if people say that this heralded the space age, then I say fine.
When I finished high school, college, I came Jersey too. So got a job as an engineer in aid. This was just before the war ended. So I went to work in 1948 as a computer. That was my title. I had a degree in mathematics. So we did all types of calculations, anything that the scientists wrote, we did by hand. At my first job, my boss was a shoe salesman from someplace in the Midwest. No one in that office spoke to me. No one. Finally, there was an old elderly woman who was, she did say a couple. But I don't know what was wrong. I don't know whether I was smart, black, or all. Because I was solving problems that they never thought about, by myself. Then, as fast as I could go up, I was promoted. And finally, my title was changed to mathematician. Then, I did various computing jobs and teaching inside the offices that used to come through, because I was working on a project that was top secret. And it had to do with nuclear testing. So we weren't permitted to talk about it. In fact, when we went to the ladies' room, we had carried a key. No one could talk to us about it. Well, there were a lot of black women with titles of scientists, but they had not been trained in this specific field. You know how the government will give you a title, but you don't have the training. But I'm sure I was the only black mathematician, female there. And I had lots of very interesting, very difficult jobs. And many times I got jobs that no one else would get. But my motto was, I don't know how to do it, but I'll do it anyhow. And I did.
Right.
Well, everybody,
I began to travel around the country quite a bit, visiting other laboratories, government agencies, and contractors. A government employee couldn't fly in those days unless you had military priority. It was easier and often faster to just take the train. At Union Station in Washington, if you stood at the regular taxi stand where only white drivers were allowed, they wouldn't pick you up. You had to walk across the street and get in the black-driven taxi. If there were no white-driven cabs, white passengers would cross and try to take a black-driven cab ahead of you. There was a book that listed colored restaurants to eat in and colored hotels to stay in. Knowledge of it was passed around. Many of the hotels were just red light places. I'd stay there one night and leave the next morning. Sometimes you'd have to hang your clothes on a hook to keep them away from the roaches. If possible, you just stayed with friends. By accident, I was at the MIT Radiation Laboratory when a call was received from a representative of the Joint Chiefs of Staff requesting that MIT come to a meeting in Washington. They asked for a U.S. Armed Services representative to come along too. The MIT people invited me to go along as the Signal Corps representative. It turned out that an ad hoc committee on test equipment, maintenance procedures, and standards was being organized. Each major branch of the U.S. services, the Canadian services, and from time to time British groups were to participate. It was not always a bed of roses. The phone would ring and you'd hear one of the JCS say, "Let one of the niggers get the phone." All of the military, kitchen, and menial support staff were black, and you'd hear things like that all the time. When we broke for lunch, Banks and I would go out to buy something off a fruit stand, because you couldn't eat with the staff in the cafeteria or in public restaurants.
Now the war is over and the Signal Corps is shrinking in size, and a lot of jockeying for jobs and people, and here I am still in the catbird seat as far as an opportunity is concerned. And just about that time, Senator McCarthy and others began their witch hunts.
And the first thing I know, I'm up on charges that I permitted communism to be praised, that I permitted people to bring copies of the Daily Worker into my office, and that I sat by quietly as the Russian form of government was praised.
Senator, what is the net result so far of your investigation into possible security leaks at Fort Monmouth?
Pretty hard to give you the net result in 1 minute's time, but some of the good results. Number one, the number of suspensions out there indicate the forceful, the intelligent, and energetic attempt being made by General Lawton here, who's the commanding officer, and by the new Army Secretary Stevens to really do a house-cleaning job. I think perhaps one of the most encouraging things from the standpoint of men like General Lawton, I know he's not in a position to comment on it, is that they know now that they have a Secretary of the Army who will back them up when they suspend communists and suspected espionage agents. In the past, many of the commanding generals, especially at Fort Monmouth, found that when they would suspend a man because of communist activities, because they thought he was an espionage agent, and if the suspension was upheld by the First Army.
I was suspended as a security risk and escorted out in the street. It was never said that I was a communist. I had a hearing, not a trial, and a lawyer whose fee cost me $5,000. I was found guilty and then fired. I was escorted out of the building again and off the base.
But they knew that, but at the end of the war, lots of choices presented themselves. As the reduction in force became effective, companies were arriving to absorb the personnel, because this was experienced personnel that they could use in their businesses. I mean, Beltel was also scouting, and a number of engineers, not engineers even, employees who worked for me were taken into Beltel. And when I went to make an application, they were undone. And I filled out the application. They were stunned. They hadn't expected me to apply for the position of radio engineer. But they kept me dangling for weeks. And finally, they had me calling every week to see what disposition had been made, And then finally, they regretted. But they had found someone that just fitted their requirements. And so I went into teaching. But I always bore a grudge against Beltel because I knew I was more than qualified, considering the personnel they had taken in.
It was just before Christmas of 1944 when they came in to the men who worked with their hands on this equipment and said they needed some men to write specifications who knew how the equipment worked. Had men who were good writers. Don't worry about spelling or grammar or anything, but need some men who knew what to write, understood equipment. And I volunteered to go on what was supposed to, at that time, to be a loan, to go and help these men. And what happened? The war ended. Germany didn't end. The Germans surrendered. And everybody was frozen where they were.
I stayed in specification for about 9 years. There, we wrote the specifications on the equipment. This was applied research, contract specifications, development contracts, and specifications for production contracts. I was working on my master's at this time at Brooklyn Polytechnic. The Army wanted to standardize transistors just like the manufacturers did on radio tubes and light bulbs. You could buy a tube made by RCA or Sylvania and plug it right into your radio and it would work. You go out and buy a GE bulb or anybody's bulb and screw it right in. They wanted to standardize transistors so you could switch Army equipment the same way. So the electronics industry had a specifications engineer from Bell Labs write the general spec, and then we were supposed to write the subsheets for each transistor, just like you did with radio tubes. Nobody could use the general spec, as all that was done was to paraphrase the tube spec, and they don't work one for one. So they asked the government to write a general spec. I got the job to do it and wrote the usable general spec. It took me about 6 weeks to write that spec, and I couldn't work on any other. Normally, you work on 2 or 3 specs at one time. There were about 25 copies of each draft that were sent to 25 different places. These were 17 government agencies and 8 key industries. Something like every 4th draft would go to 75 additional industries. When we'd finish a draft, we'd make copies. Sometimes I'd have as many as 10 engineers from all over the United States standing there, waiting to hand carry a draft. Once the Korean War started, we had to work 7 days a week and 2 nights. Spec writers were that hard pressed. I remember one piece of equipment I worked on. We dropped the security classification so we could do it faster. The MPQ-10, or mortar locator radar. They were rushing it to get it out there to solve the mortar problem. Being one of those regular Army veterans, you had an automatic membership card to the right wing of the Democratic Party. Then the veterans who qualified for the Veterans of Foreign Wars could get a double membership card to the right wing. Painted with all these things, I was automatically considered a right-winger, so I had no fear of danger during the McCarthy era. I believe the McCarthy thing was a racist, anti-Semitic thing as far as Fort Monmouth was concerned. I think everybody who was charged at Fort Monmouth with the McCarthy sweep was cleared. They broadcasted over the PA system the day when the last one was cleared, and everybody cheered. What happened was you couldn't come back to your position until after you were cleared, and you couldn't draw your pay for the time you were away. And then, according to the law, you had to come back and work for a specified period of time, like 12 months or something, in order to draw back pay. I think the legal fees at least equaled the back pay. Some of the accused left immediately when their 12 months were up. One lawyer out of the whole country would take their cases. He took all of them and dropped the rest of his practice. You had to give him a retainer of $5,000 or $10,000 because he knew his business was gone the minute he took these cases. They'd have the women who had gone to college but hadn't been technical majors trained for desk work and clerical duties. I know one woman who was an art major. They trained her for drafting. She was a graduate of Hunter College and was good on certain types of work in the drafting room, much better than the average male draftsman. They also trained women as machinists, radio mechanics, truck drivers, etc. After the war, they were almost prejudiced against sex, getting rid of those women. When they'd finished laying off, there wasn't a woman left in that machine shop. They got rid of the women truck drivers. They could do it easily because there weren't many women veterans. A veteran got preference and could bump her.
They set up the nucleonics branch, and I became the section chief. At first, nucleonics was so small, it was made into a section and attached to the applied physics branch. I got them to change the name of my unit to radiation physics because we had charge of all the secondary calibration methods for nuclear radiation sources. This is where I worked very closely with people from the other 2 services and with the National Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C. During the early days, we did quite a lot of travel. We were building up at that time. We went from 3 to about 10 people. When I became section chief in '49, it went to about 16. About a year or so later, they reorganized again, and they combined my section with another fellow's, and I became an assistant section chief. All of the work for field tests and for test of nuclear weapons and so forth were done in this area. We always had to have somebody out observing or testing or checking to see how Army equipment held up in a nuclear environment. I had a lot of fun with that from the fall of '48 until the fall of '53. Blacks used to get together quite a number of times at somebody's house. We would go visiting in the community, but generally I stayed home with my wife and the kids. When we did visit somebody that we worked with, it was usually a Jewish couple who invited us, and we invited them in turn. We had internal training programs, and I taught in a few of them quite a lot. Engineers hadn't had much to do with microwaves, and so they hadn't had much to do with learning fields and strengths. They had more trouble than physicists did because physicists had had field theory. These classes were for anybody, but in fact, most of my classes were all white students.
I always felt that as making a contribution. I did too. In fact, I know we did. I know we did.
And so the country was really gearing up to its maximum strength because we were about to be defeated. Things were tough. We almost lost that war.
You have to remember that I was a depression child, so there was no easy access to any goal. You couldn't count on success in any goal that you chose to pursue.
So it was, unfortunately, I have to use the word exhilarating. You had a sense of purpose, but it was also very sobering to know that if you made an error, had an error in your calculation or advice, somebody's life is in jeopardy.
Everybody out of again, thank you for being here.
Good night, everybody.